So good evening. I'm going to call our select board meeting of Monday, January 26th to order. We're on Zoom this evening due to the snow emergency, and I'm joined by Vice Chair Anthea Brady and members Mike Bentoncourt, Bill McGonigal, and Paris Bayani, and our new town manager, Chris Senior. Chris, you get to be the new guy for at least a couple more meetings. Um, we have a lot of things on the agenda this evening. We will go through, I expect to go through in order, that we do have one committee interview to do, and our applicant may not be able to join until 8 o'clock. So we may take a few things out of order. So for the town manager, you might need to be ready to give a report out. I will also note for any of the attendees who are in the audience, we will take public comment this evening as the third order of business. If we have to pause for our public hearing on Eversource, we will start that promptly at 7:45. If people wish to give public comment on anything other than the grant of location for 959 Main Street, if you could raise your hand so that our clerk can make note of the names, and then she will call on you in order of how you've raised your hands. And so I think with that, then we will start with the acceptance of donations, go to the manager's report, and then we'll move into public comment. At 7:45, we will invite in people related to the Eversource grant of location. So we can start with donations. I'll turn it over to Anthea.
Move that we accept a donation of, sorry, I am on 3 different screens right now and I am a problem.
Okay.
I got it. Hang on. Ready? Move that we accept with gratitude a donation of $3,000 from the Johnson family to the fire department for the fire department gift account.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. I heard Mike, Bill, Anthea, and Paris. Okay, and myself. Thank you.
Move that we accept supplies from Barbara Leonardi to the recreation department to support their growing sewing/crochet program.
Second.
Okay. Mike,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Bill,
Aye.
Anthea,
Yes.
and I vote yes. I'll do roll call votes this evening. Okay, thank you.
Move that we accept with gratitude an EEC stabilization grant of $13,720 for the Recreation Department Kid Connection RAP EEC childcare license for the month of January 2026.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, Anthea,
Yes.
Bill,
Aye.
Paris,
Yes.
Mike.
Yep.
And I vote yes. And the last donation.
Move that we accept with gratitude a municipal energy technical assistance grant of $15,000 from the Department of Energy Resources to perform an in-depth energy audit of the West Side Fire Station.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, Paris,
Yes.
Bill,
Aye.
Mike,
Yes.
Anthea,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you for those donations, and thank you to the residents who are sharing with us. And now we'll do the town manager's report. So Chris, thank you for the detailed update. I know you have some staff appointments to announce, and I don't know if you want to give any other updates on your first week or the snowstorm, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Thank you all. By the way, I really appreciated the everyone coming together for my swearing.
Recording in progress.
I just want to give a thank you to all of you. I want to give a thank you to all the staff I've been working with so far, the town leadership, and a variety of committees and residents who've been great as I've run into people and chatted. So we're looking forward to this, to building those relationships and working with folks over the hopefully long time to come. So been a fun few weeks. I even got Chief Osborne, after I finished my tour of the fire department, gave me a tour of Winchester. So I got the behind the scenes view of the Steve Osborne Winchester, which was awesome. So in fact, I'll pivot right from that to the official business. There are 4 firefighter appointees. I'll announce them all to you. So I think you have all of them in the packet. Would you like me to name them, or you just want me to talk about them a little bit, or what's the style? I don't want to break any rules here.
No, I think you can just generally say who they are and the role that they have, and anything else on, we've been looking to hire some candidates, I think.
So when I actually met with department heads on my first day, Chief Osborne said that he had people in the pipeline, five. There's four teed up. One had to complete some other element of this. This is all through civil service, which is an extremely lengthy process. So I also said I'd like to start meeting with appointees before they come before the select board. So we were able to pull it off, and I met with everyone last week. And there are four, and I'll tell you briefly. Kyle Terranova. He is he's a Boxborough native. He now lives in Somerville. He's actually in paramedic training school and is riding an ambulance right now for a private company. Great experience, really energized. He actually just ran a marathon in Hawaii a year or so ago, so congratulations on that. But really ready to do this. Somebody who really was, excited and very interested in doing this professionally for the long term. Joseph Squizero, again, if any of you are up at Mike Boyle's Strength and Conditioning, he's apparently training a large chunk of the fire department already, so he's friends with a lot of folks. Melrose native, really, really ready to do this again. All these candidates were impressive. They're in their maturity. They're all in their 20s or early 30s, and they're all ready for this. They're there, and this is not just something that they've always dreamed about, but it's something they're actually all into. Again, I think Joe was really he had some great questions for the chief when we sat and talked as well. We have Dan Collins, a Boston native who grew up on the South Shore and is back in Boston. He spent some 4 years in the Marine Corps, really well seasoned. He really knows what he's doing, very confident. And again, we had a really great conversation as we sat around the table about training and using time. And I mean, time to build and train. So it was really, really, again, I gained a lot from that conversation. I think the chief enjoyed the supplemental. And then Cody Phillips, he's a Leominster native who's been doing fabrication of vehicles and metal for years. He's really, really skilled. I think he could be a great resource for the fire department in a lot of different ways. And again, he's ready to do these. He's someone who's thought through this, and he's definitely a great candidate. So I will say that all four of them are fantastic. I'm looking forward to having them join the force, and they're all ready to go. I don't think you have to vote on these because of the way the civil service process works. So, but it was exciting in my very first week to have four new firefighters on the way, and they know who I am. I know who they are, and I'm excited to watch them go through the academy and become full-time members.
Great.
So pivoting just to me, so it's been kind of a whirlwind, which is the way it should be, right? I've met over at the Jenks Center. I've toured the police department and the fire department and the public works department. I'm heading off to the library this week. I'm meeting with Superintendent Hackett tomorrow, though he and I have been in touch over the weekend because of the storm. We were actually just talking at 4:30 today. So it's been going. I've walked through the entire building, met the staff. I think the only person I haven't met yet is the town planner who was out with the flu, but I think I've met pretty much everybody else in the building. So really, really great opportunity. Been up and down in meetings. As you know, that's the life of government: meetings, lots of prep and study and review. And I also met with Representative Mike Day this past week, and I'm have a scheduling soon to be set to meet Senator Lewis. So want to get plugged into everybody on that front too. So it's been a really exciting couple of weeks. And again, in terms of that HR tweak, I will be meeting with all permanent appointees, which I think is the right thing to do. I've long done that, and Chief Osborne told me that 30 years ago when he got hired, that's the way it was too. They used to bring the candidates across the street and meet the town manager. So what's old is new again in this case. So again, excited for this. Lots going on. And then the only other project, I think it's been fairly well received. I fairly well circulated, I should say, but I'm sure the storm has wiped out people's memories a bit. Eversource has some emergency repair work going on. So once the storm clears, they will begin their work, which is on Pond Street and on Columbia. I have that right?
Chesterford, maybe?
I'm sorry?
Is it Chesterford?
Yeah, no, that's Cambridge. I'm sorry.
Oh, Cambridge. Okay.
Cambridge. I'm sorry. So they should only be taking a part of one lane. It'll only be 24 hours, but they have to repair an underground utility line that was damaged south of town, but it runs right under Winchester. So the initial work done at that base of a bike path's already happened. That opening has been made. It's been sealed up. But with the snow, I have to believe they're going to be a little bit delayed with getting some of their work done. But the neighborhood was all reached door to door over the weekend. There's been a lot of push on social media. Please remind folks, the schools have been informed. It'll hopefully not be any more than a 24-hour cycle, and they'll have the road patched back up again. But it's something that had to get done. And then with the storm, crews have been out continuously for over 24 hours. They're taking a little bit of a break this evening. Be right back at things at 6 a.m. And the schools are opening 2 hours late tomorrow just to allow a little bit more cleaning in the parking lots. There will be some delays in getting some of the smaller roads widened, so I hope everyone has a little bit of patience on that front and helps out in any way they can. If you have a fire hydrant on your street, if you could dig it out, that would most certainly help out the fire department if there's ever an emergency. And if you have any questions, just give the town hall a call. But sidewalks too will take a little bit of time to get dug out. But the work is well underway.
Thanks, Chris. Okay. Any questions for Chris on his report or any of those updates? Okay. So let's go to public comment. I think I see John Healy's hand raised and Laura Conti. So John, if you'd like to, Patty will promote you to panelist so you can speak. And we'll call on you first, then Ms. Conti, and maybe we'll get to Ms. Mooney and start our hearing a minute or two late. But
great, appreciate it. I don't know how I turn on my video. I don't have an option for that, but that's okay by me. The reason I asked for a few, just 1 or 2 minutes is of your time tonight is, and I know you're going to be very busy with the discussions about the special town meeting coming up. I just wanted to provide you a heads up, kind of a courtesy call that I have launched a campaign in town to bring the possibility of ranked choice voting to the voters of Winchester at some point in the future. We probably are going to take I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, so I'll probably be using the same playbook as some of our neighboring towns, Arlington, Lexington, Bedford, by asking for a study commission first. I'm hoping to put that on as an article on the warrant for the Springtown meeting, and if it passes, we'll impanel a healthy selection of people to consider the various options for reconsidering the vote tabulation, and then put another article on the warrant for the fall town meeting. That's just kind of like the 50,000 foot my kind of suggestions that I'd like to see the town move in. So, like I said, I just wanted to let you know that there's this campaign underway, and take any questions that you might have about it.
So, Mr. Mooney, Mr. Healy, normally we don't engage in Q&A. If you'd like to potentially come back when that citizen petition is more fully baked, but we just take public comment and we receive it, and then we move along to the next speaker. So I appreciate that update, and we look forward to hearing more.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay. Next up is Laura Conti, and then I think we'll press pause. We have 2 more folks in queue, but I'll take Laura Conti, and then we'll move to our public hearing.
I lost Laura. Hold on a minute. Let me see if she's, there she is.
Hi, good
Okay.
evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Hi, so this is Laura Conti for Highland View Ave. Good evening to all the select board members, and welcome to our new town manager, Mr. Senior. I just wanted to, I'll be very brief, just say thank you for all the work that's happened on State of the Town. I've been following along. I've been watching on WinCam to your prior meetings. I've participated in the TMMA sessions that Paris has done. So thank you so much for all of your work. And I just want to, as you go about the final process where you're honing in on the number for the override, I just urge you to incorporate the full amount that was identified by the school committee. It's reasonable. I would say it's restrained. It's not nice to have stuff. It's essential service needs that are critical to implementing literacy program, math review, equity across our schools. These are things that are too late coming to Winchester, so we must incorporate them. And I just strongly urge you to take that full amount and include that in your number. I can't think of a better investment than our children. And it's not putting us ahead. This is not a fluffy wish list of things. These are essential things that our kids need. So thank you in advance for considering that. And then lastly, just as a town meeting member, I've heard many presentations about the needs at town hall, and but that they're just too big for our budget. So this is the time. We need to make sure that what's needed at town hall isn't too big to do, because if we don't do it now, I can't imagine when we would do it. And these are critical things in our town. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Conti. Okay, so we're going to press pause for a minute on public comment. We will come back to the folks with their hand raised, but at this time, I'd like to open up our public hearing to discuss an Eversource grant of location for Main Street for the installation of a conduit to serve 959 Main. I know we have Jackie from Eversource in the audience with us. We have, I believe, Matt Schumann as well. Maybe Patty's moving them in. But we have the
Yes,
materials.
I just brought it in.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Patty. You just brought them in? Okay. So
No, Matt should be coming in. There he is. Yep.
okay, Matt's here. Great. So Matt, we have all the paperwork. We have the location of this grant of location. Obviously, we're kind of in the winter months. But do you have any, maybe just go ahead and present to us on, timing and any disruption, any other details on this grant of location? And then Jackie Duffy, if we have some questions, we can ask those of her. But go ahead, Matt.
Simply to install a pole. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. This isn't an underground petition. It's actually a petition to install a pole. The pole is located near the Verizon building our new pole is located near the Verizon building on Main Street, near Main Street and Hemingway Street. And it's to provide service to the Cafe DeCali at 959 Main Street. I talked to DPW before we got all this huge snowstorm, and they were okay with doing the work during the winter moratorium. I don't know if that's going to change now because of the snow. But they would coordinate with DPW on the work. And it's simply to install the pole, and then they'll go overhead to serve the building.
Okay. Any idea as to, is this just like a traffic detail a day? Do we expect any disruption? I understand it's not a ground opening, but do we have a sense of any disruption to traffic?
Of Jackie, if you would be able to answer that question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
It would probably just be a day.
Okay.
Yes, there is the parking lane there, so I don't think they would have to, close the lane down. They'd probably just be setting up in the parking lane, or they could do a little diversion because you have parking lanes on both sides. So I don't think it would be a major traffic disruption.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Eversource? Then I'll ask if anyone in the public has any questions. Any questions from the board for the town engineer or for Eversource? Okay. Does any member of the public have any wish to be heard on this public hearing for this particular grant of location?
Can I ask everyone who had their hand raised for public comment to please raise it so that I know, to lower it so that I know if this person wants to speak on public comment. I mean, on the hearing. Okay, I'm bringing somebody in. do you have questions regarding the public hearing and the poll?
Hey there, yes. We are the proprietors and owners of 968 Main Street, and we are wondering where is this here pole going to be installed in? Because we received a notice from the town saying there's like a public hearing notice. So we're just wondering where this pole is going to be installed structurally.
It's going to be in the sidewalk, and it's going to be near the Verizon building. The address of the Verizon building is 954 Main Street.
954. How tall is this pole to be envisioned to be?
It's a 45
I
foot.
believe it's
Sorry.
a regular. Yes.
I'm sorry, it's Jackie Duffy. It's
Jackie.
a 45-foot pole.
45-foot pole.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds about right. Commensurate for the average, I would suppose. Well, do we have any questions on our end? 他会在 Verizon 那边就是。Yeah, okay. 好了, I think we're good on our end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member of the public who has a question or a comment regarding this grant of location? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing and select board can deliberate or make a motion. Are there any additional context from Matt or Jackie that we need to hear? Otherwise, we can just deliberate.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Nothing for me.
Okay. Let's make a motion.
Move that we approve the Eversource grant of location for 95/97A. Oh, of a new pole at 95/97A at 959 Main Street.
Second.
Okay. Any additional
Right.
discussion? I'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Bill,
Aye.
Paris,
Aye.
Mike,
Yes.
Anthea,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thanks, Jackie. Stay warm.
I try.
Thank you, Matt, as well. Okay, back to public comment then before we get on to the next bits of our agenda. So Elizabeth Mooney had her hand raised. She still has her hand raised. If we could elevate her, then looks like we might be done with public comment. After Ms. Mooney. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. My name is Elizabeth Mooney, and I just want to start by welcoming Mr. Senior to Winchester and by thanking the Select Board and to everyone involved in the state of the town for giving so generously of your time and expertise. The level of civic involvement in our town is one of the things that makes Winchester truly special, and I appreciate all of your hard work. I'm offering public comment tonight in full support of a robust tax override. As you all know, our last override was in 2019, and it's clear that given the macroeconomic environment in which we're operating, the 2.5% annual increase in taxes allowed by the legislature simply isn't enough to sustain the services and educational excellence that make Winchester, Winchester. In particular, I strongly support the $4.5 million that I understand the schools want. Frankly, I would support more. We spend less per pupil than many comparable districts, and as the parent to elementary school kids, I can say from personal experience that it's critical that we fund a new literacy curriculum, review the math curriculum, address inequities across the schools, and adequately fund the schools so that they can improve, rather than just seeking to provide level services over year. So I'll close by thanking you again for your time and asking that you support an override in amount sufficient to keep Winchester schools excellent, its services robust, and its infrastructure well maintained, because that's part of what makes Winchester, the town that we all know and love. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Patty, I don't see any additional hands raised. Am I missing anything?
No other hands for this.
Okay.
I do have the guests for the next hearing.
Yes. So the next thing is I will go back to the comptroller's report, I promise, if the board had any questions, but the next two items are license changes. So we have a alteration of premises for Nouvelle Maison, and we do have some information in our packet. Miss Kimberly is in the audience, if we could elevate her. And then we do have another application for the American Civic Association, but let's take up Nouvelle Maison first. In our packet, we have the updated application. We have the letter from Ms. Kimberly's attorney. We have a drawing of what the premises specific areas for the retail license. And Celine, when you're ready, if you have any additional context you'd like for us to consider.
Yep. Hi there. So I came to you guys in August requesting a pouring license for Nouvelle Maison that it went to ABCC, and this is the ABCC has approved the pouring license, but they need our two licenses to be mutually exclusive when it comes to square footage covered on the premises. So this is an amendment to our package store license to exclude the cafe, which will be included in the pouring license.
Okay.
That's
And
the
do you
sense
need
of
to
it.
create any physical separation between those spaces?
We will be adding like a rope just where the cafe ends, just so it's clear that there is separation between the cafe and the wine and liquor area. So there is going to be that physical separation, which the ABCC was fine with that being enough. We covered it in August as well. The one thing that we will need to be making sure of is anyone who buys an actual full glass of wine at the cafe can't be walking around the store with it full. And anyone who wants to buy a bottle of wine to take out cannot actually go to the cafe register. They need to check out at the front register.
Okay. All right. Does anybody from the select board have questions for the applicant? Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
So is the motion approving the section 12 and section 15 license? Or is it approving?
It's an alteration of the section 15
All
license.
right. Move that we approve the alteration of premise of the existing section 15 license for Nouvelle Holdings LLC doing business as Nouvelle Maison at 30 Church Street.
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion? We'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Anthea.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Paris?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
And I vote yes. Thank you. Thank you, Celine.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
And the next license application to consider is a change of manager, officer, and directors from the American Civic Association, doing business as the Sons of Italy. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard on Michael Sarica? We could elevate him, I suppose.
These two, yeah, Michael and
Okay.
Carolina are both the applicants for this.
Okay,
Michael's the manager and Carolina is one of the board members.
great.
Yeah, so we are just filing for change of manager for the manager to be Michael Sarica, and then the change of board of directors just due to staffing changes.
Okay. And these staffing changes with this license are effective, obviously, immediately, or the license just needs to reflect the current structure? I assume these changes have been in place?
Yes, it just needs to reflect the current structure. Exactly.
Okay. Any additional information you want to share before I turn it over to the board?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the board for the applicant? Okay. Make a motion.
Move that we approve the change of manager and officers directors for the American Civic Association Sons of Italy at 117 Swanton Street.
Thanks.
Any additional discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Paris.
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mike? Anthea?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. And thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. and Ms. Sarica. Okay, so
Thank you.
right before we get into,
Excuse me, Ms. Chair, Madam Chair.
yes,
Have a question. Joshua Bears asked, with the continued snow this evening, is there any chance that school will be canceled completely by morning? So it would be to Mr. Senior.
Well, the report I got at 4:30 today, directly from the superintendent and the public works director, it's a 2-hour delay for each school. So they're planning on fully opening, but just with a 2-hour delay.
Thank you.
thanks, Patty. Thanks for catching that. Okay, I know I had skipped over the comptroller's report. I wanted to go back, and the comptroller has joined us on the Zoom. We had a lot of information in our packet, including financial statements, actuarial statements, and comptroller report. And my apologies, Stacy, for not jumping to that right after public comment. But does any member of the select board want to hear from Stacy or any questions on the comptroller's report? I want to turn it over and get to that topic before we get to appointments for committees.
No need to apologize. I was really only here to listen. And if you had questions, I'm here. I know you have a pretty jam-packed meeting, so hopefully.
I don't have any questions. We've exchanged an email or a phone call, I think, every day since our last meeting. So I've reflected the numbers in Stacy's report as well as her projections with Chris into the numbers. I'll just make that comment. But thank you for constantly being on top of the numbers, even $8,000 moves, and sending those to me right away.
No problem.
And I would just, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Stacey, it looks like, I mean, we're pretty in line with previous years in terms of expenses and revenues. Should we anticipate that that'll continue through the next quarter?
Yeah, I would think so. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for Stacy? When do we expect the updated actual report on the pension, Stacy? Would we do one in this calendar year or?
We're still waiting for the final report, but we did get the actuarial tables approved by the retirement board based on the COLA vote. So I can certainly share those with the board. I'm still waiting for the full report, which we might have received, but it's I'll share that as soon as I get it.
Okay. And then the Audit Advisory Committee will meet in February. Plug for anybody. We have an opening for one applicant to accept those final financial statements, right?
Not so much to accept the financials, it's to establish the audit contract for the next 3 years. And that's something that the audit committee advises the select board about. So hopefully everyone that said they can make it, and we can get that passed along.
Okay. All right.
But I'll be here for the rest of the meeting for your discussion.
Michonne, I think that's me and you, and I know
it is.
Me a note on that, Stacy. So I'll be sure to attend that because I know it's an issue. Yeah,
it's you and I. If any member of the public wants to join our fun little group that meets twice a year, it's not a heavy lift. Just my plug. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah.
Okay, so now moving into our business agenda, we have one committee appointment to make this evening. And I believe Jason is here. We have one applicant for the Capital Planning Committee, Jason Roeder. We have his application in our packet, and he will be on to answer any questions in a minute.
Just a minute, I'll bring him in.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back.
Sorry, I think I changed you.
Yeah, I got dropped, Patty. It wasn't your fault.
Okay, there's Jason.
Okay. Hey, good evening, Jason. Thanks for your application. Generally, so everyone has what you've submitted. So we have your statement of interest. Normally, what we would ask is if you'd like to make your own additional statement or make your own plug as to why you'd like to be appointed to the Capital Planning Committee. And then if the board has questions, we'll ask those after you do your intro and your interest. So you can take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I will happily do that. I'll try and keep it relatively brief and look forward to any and all questions that folks have. As noted earlier by Ms. Mooney, you know, Winchester has a great foundation and history of civic engagement and volunteerism, and I've started on that journey myself through town meeting membership, and at that town meeting have seen the work of many valuable committees, including capital planning. And I heard of an opening on the committee and thought I'd raise my hand because not only do I have a strong interest, but I also have a strong background in this area. I have done capital planning at the state of Massachusetts level a while ago, but for multiple years. And I've also done this with a couple of nonprofits in town. You know, have a business degree and have an affinity and interest in numbers. And also, I would add that, you know, as noted, the state of the town work is you know, at full steam here, and we have some important decisions to make this spring, and I'm sure that will have some big ramifications on choices we need to make and priorities and analysis related to capital spending and planning. You know, that's already begun, and I'm sure that will continue, and that's a kind of opportunity for impact that excites me. I think it's something I can do well. I'm somewhat familiar with the other members of the committee and look forward to, you know, an opportunity to work with them and this board and others to do the best we can in town.
Okay. Thank you. I have one question, but I'll go last. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Roeder? All right. Hearing none, I guess I'll ask mine. So, Jason, you had pulled papers for a planning board to be on the ballot for the planning board this coming March. If you were to pursue that and be elected to the planning board, we would expect the planning board to put you in their seat at capital planning. But do you have any update on kind of your interest on doing both roles or the capital planning role? So if you could maybe give some context for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can update you on that. So that is correct. I did take out papers earlier this month for planning board. There was a period of time earlier in the month when I think it was, you know, unclear, as it usually is in the beginning of the process, of who's going to run, and so I thought I would take that step just as an option. But since then, I believe the candidates that are running are among those that I would support. And it was not really my intention to run this year for planning board. It was more of a, if no one else is doing it, I'll consider it. You know, I have been excited about this capital planning role and have had good conversations with many of you about it. So my plan A, and the only plan at the moment, is to, you know, hopefully do the capital planning role, and then, you know, whatever the future might bring on planning is you know, off in the future. So no, my plan is to not return papers for this coming election for planning board.
Okay, thank you. Okay. If there's no other questions for Mr. Roeder, we can take a motion.
Move that we appoint Jason Roeder to the Capital Planning Committee for the term to expire January 1st, 2029.
Second.
Roll call vote. I'll start with Pars.
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
Anthea?
Yes.
I vote yes. Thank you, Jason, for your interest and for applying, and look forward to working with you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next up on our agenda is a request for a 15-minute parking space on Main Street in front of Camellas. We have in our packet an email from Camellas to the town manager's office. They're asking to have, I believe it's the space that's the closest to Converse Place in front of the fire hydrant. Is that correct, Patty? It is one space closest to their front door?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And since we are the street wardens, we can deliberate this. We certainly see people parking in front of the fire hydrant. It's my favorite place to watch people do U-turns on Main Street. If we are to consider this as a board, I think it would be important that it be a 15-minute space, not tied specifically to hours and not tied to a specific restaurant's operations. It could be for somebody running into CVS or grabbing a coffee. I think it's probably a reasonable request to turn that space over, but I would not want to limit it to just that business. So with that, I'll turn it over to the floor to opine and discuss.
I'll just say I'm, as we all are, very familiar with that corner and that space. A lot of times there's actually people who will double park right there or who will park in front of the hydrant. So I think specifically creating a 15-minute space there could be pretty helpful in sort of managing some of that pickup parking for Camillus.
I would just echo what you said, Michelle. I think it's a good idea to help traffic circulate and turn over. And I wouldn't want to tie it to just one business because it's something that could benefit all the businesses that are right there. Whether you want to run into CVS for milk or Camillus for pizza or Artie's for some jewelry. So.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Mike, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Certainly supportive of the request, and just as long as the applicant knows, it's always in this area. We're always evolving the circulation there, and there will be different impacts now than there will be in the spring and summertime when we have the outdoor dining and take-up spaces. So it's not something that's there forever, but certainly something that we should try and make an effort to keep talking about. So certainly support the request.
Okay. Chris, do we know if DPW can get a sign up or change out a sign? Obviously, snow is a priority right now, but do we have a sense of, could this be done in the month of February?
I will check it from the impression I got from their operations is absent snow. They should be able to turn something like that around fairly quickly. I think it's a fairly simple sign, but I will double check.
Okay. So I have one other request maybe for town staff, which is having been once caught up myself, and when we select board changed parking along the Jenks parking lot near the church that used to be permit parking and turned to 2-hour parking, if our parking enforcement could perhaps grant folks some grace in the first week or two that it's up. It may not look terribly different. The signs are, everything else is 1 hour. But if we could maybe put that in a town manager newsletter, and if people are there, I think the parking enforcement has a little, hey, you've parked in the wrong space. Maybe give people some grace before we start ticketing. I think people need time to adjust. So that would be my only ask.
And just to make sure it was seen, there's a comment in the chat asking how that will be enforced. And my assumption is just, as you're saying, regular parking enforcement who's in town monitoring parking spaces will do that.
That would be my understanding. Just be enforcing everything else's.
Yep. Okay. Any additional discussion before we?
Hold on, there's more.
Oh, there is. Okay. So Q&A.
So Peter, Casey is asking, does this take an existing space?
It repurposes a 1-hour space to turn over to be a 15-minute space.
And then the other question, is this really effective?
I think the answer is we will find out. I don't know if others feel differently. The business certainly thinks it will be effective for what they might have as a takeout operation. I think we will see how often that space is open or how often it turns over.
So the other statement is there seems to be no enforcement around China Sky.
I mean, at this point, Michelle, it sounds like we're getting a public comment on this, which we should probably have people announcing themselves and coming to our virtual table.
Or we can just hand these off to the town manager as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any additional questions? I think we'll I think, Chris, perhaps if we take this vote, which we should, we have not even made the motion yet, but perhaps we can answer some of these questions in some outreach, some publication, some newsletter. That would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people have questions like that, feel free to call my office. That's what we're there for.
Okay.
Move that we approve the request to turn the parking space. This is hard without a paper agenda in front of me, so I apologize for the slow motions here. That we adjust the parking space at 529 Main Street into a pickup curbside space for 15-minute parking.
Second.
Well, friendly amendment. Do we want to call it a pickup space? I mean, don't we want to just limit it to 15 minutes, as Michelle was suggesting?
Yes.
Motion that we accept Bill's friendly amendment and adjust the parking space at 529 Main Street to a 15-minute parking spot.
Do you want to second that again? Thank you. Thanks for that friendly amendment, Bill, as well. Okay, any additional discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Bill.
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
Paris?
Yes.
Anthea?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, thank you. Next, we have the override discussion, and I'll just note for anyone who is hanging on the meeting, override could take a minute. We also will we have a Human Rights Commission working group, an update on Washington and Swanton Street and that development, and then overnight parking pilot discussion. Then we have a consent agenda. So we do have a few more items of business, but let's dive into the override discussion. And Paris and I had iterated on a deck that he has put into the box for the select board to review. Paris, if you want to go ahead and screen share, there's also some questions at the end of that presentation that we need to, I think, consider as a board. That's specific to the override. Then as it relates to the special town meeting on February 9th, Anthea and I were part of a planning call this morning with Chris and the moderator and others. So the select board, we need to do some discussion on sort of time limits and speakers and materials and what kind of information we want to try to get into a packet. The packet needs to get locked down, not packet, I should say, the motion and background. We need to agree on some messaging by the end of the day, Wednesday. So first, let's do the override, but then we need to talk special town meeting and speakers, time limits, and materials. So go ahead, Paris, if you'd like. And if people have comments, I would ask given that we're on Zoom, if we could try to raise our hands and so we can all be heard. I think that'd be great.
What are you seeing right now? Are you seeing the
front page?
Perfect. The browser. Okay, great.
Yep.
And if I just want to make sure as I'm navigating this, if I switch here, do you see the model?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Albeit tiny, but yes.
Wonderful. Can always make it bigger. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks, Michelle. So last time we talked, and I'll try to make this full screen. We talked about what do we need to do to sort of stay on track. So I'll talk for maybe about 10 minutes, and then please interrupt, and then we can always talk about this for as long as we want. So just to start, our calendar is here. It's the same calendar now that we've been seeing really since November. Again, not to sound like Phil, but we are thankfully working our way down it. Today is the 26th. Last time we accepted the final state of the town report. We had the capital discussion with the CPC, and then we talked about the warrant for February 9th. The sessions before that, we of course sat with the school committee. So what we have here in this 1/9 budget summit, of course, is Wednesday. That didn't occur, so that's moving to 2 days from today. So what we have to do tonight is to debate the operating figure the override figure for operating and capital, try to settle on either a tentative override number or a range that is giving the town guidance. Because as we've talked about, we have info sessions coming up over the next several weeks up to 2/9. We have one tomorrow. with TMMA. We then have the Wednesday budget summit. We have, next week, we have the following week on the public hearing and the special town meeting on the 9th. And then we have another session the next day on the 10th. And then we have to actually vote on the ballot question sometime Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, 2/11 to 2/13. So we've done a lot, but we have some things remaining to do. Just wanted to flag this for people who are listening or who are watching, which is that the State of the Town report is available now. It's a fairly readable report. It's about 6,000 words, but written in a broadly sort of accessible format. There's a QR code there. You can just Google Winchester State of the Towns right at the top. There's also 14 backup reports from what the committee did available on the drive as well, available on the website as well. And then you can link through to the box. So in terms of what we'll do today, just give a quick recap on the model, a quick recap on capital, an even quicker one. And then the bulk of it is focused on tax impact, which is what do varying levels of the override, how do they actually impact residents from a tax increase perspective and a dollar perspective? I got a couple of questions. I know Mike had asked about that with Michelle last time. Andy and Bill sent me some follow-up questions. So all of that should be in here. And Michelle and I had spent some time with our staff pulling this information together. So to go back to start with model assumptions where we are, this is the sort of core operating case running through the model. We have 3% growth in municipal departments, health insurance at 15, which again is below the consultant's view, Winchester Public Schools at 4.25%, 5% in the first year, followed by 3%, and then pension and OPEB growing at 3%. Again, that's over the 4-year period on a combined basis. We've added an extra $800,000 into the model of additional revenue. So, however you allocate it is less important. And that's starting, this July and carrying each year. So that's an additional 800,000, roughly 500 in interest income, 100 in solar power, cost of fraying, and then 200 in fines and fees. And then we've raised our turnback level. So the conservatism, there of not filling positions basically by an additional 400,000. So that 1.2 of incremental revenue that we haven't fully found yet is currently running through the model. And that's what you see here. So as we talked about, our objective is to keep our reserves between 10 and 14%. DLS guidance and Moody's and all of our other analysis, our reserves presently have been 14.5 to 20. And on a 3-year basis, which is FY29, or a 4-year basis, FY30, we see the impact. So it really depends on whether we're doing strategic additions and to what degree versus level services. And then we have 4 override scenarios here. And obviously, if we're trying to get to 3 years, it's easier than if we're trying to get to 4 years. Okay. We also looked at a couple of things that we could talk about later, which is if we were to defer some of the municipal asks. So, for example, I picked somewhat at random a few of them, $150,000 to $220,000 worth of $140,000 to $220,000 worth of asks, and pushed those out. I picked library, health, and DPW warden, but it doesn't matter what you pick. If you pick a number that's in that range, and that takes the amount of municipal asks we accepted down by about 10 percentage points, or about 20%. And that adds, 0.5% or 0.8% to our operating reserve. So it helps if we obviously don't, spend as much money on some of these investments. It does help a little bit at the margin. We can talk about that as an option as well. The other case that we looked at was 1.7 million. So this is taking the previous 1.2, adding an additional 500,000. We've talked about transfer station and OPEB being the two that have, the scale to get there. 1.7, I think we talked about last time, people felt was quite aggressive. I had agreed with that too. But again, it's here. And obviously, if you have 1.7 of cost savings or revenue instead of 1.2, all the numbers are better. So strategic additions, that would be at a 4-year basis and at 4.1%, when $10 million would be at 5%. So it gets you almost a full percentage point. At a $13 million override. Again, this is just operating override. It would be 0.8%, but higher revenue and cost savings there. Okay, so none of that should be new, but just wanted to review that. Capital output, again, also none of it new. We've talked about it a couple of times now. The stabilization funds have 86 million, 85.6 million of requests. They have available resources of 31.7, unfunded need of 53.9. That's not a depreciation schedule. That's their actual requests. We have a fairly consistent, we checked, set of projects over the last 3 to 5 years in the CIP that are at the top. Town Hall consistently, the Ambrose Morocco and Lincoln School repairs, and then other building repairs, which are public safety building and library, fleet, and then the same parks, which are Mullen, Ginn, and Skillings are the three left now that Leonard and McDonald have been done. The people have asked this question, just to be clear on it. There's debt service coming off the stabilization funds, particularly the building stabilization fund, but a bit of both, which goes back to the original construction of Ambrose. That's in the 31.7. Without that, the 31.7 would be lower. There are some things, and Enzo had talked about this with us, that you could potentially delete from the 85.6. The obvious ones being Ridge and Lockland and maybe Parkhurst. There's other things though potentially that are not in it, and then as Roger always likes to tell us, things break that we don't have identified, and this is what CPC told us last time. So 2 meetings ago, when I think Brian was here, he said our recommendation is H, which they reiterated last time, and then last time when Brian was here with Roger, they said the CPC's view is that any package below D, they would, which is the 2.5 roughly, that they would consider to be a failure from again their perspective. Whether the select board agrees is our own discussion. So then that leads to a conversation on we have an operating number we have to get to. We have a capital number we are taking a look at. What are the impacts of the various scenarios on taxpayers? So to start with, I just want to go over some assumptions because the assumptions are important. So our tax rate today is 11.08. It's what we call our mill rate. So for every $1,000 of value, an individual pays $11.08 of tax. So if you have $1 million home, you would pay $11,080 of tax. The average house in Winchester, that's actually say home. The average home in Winchester is 1.456 million, 1.457 million. The average single family house, you see that little table at the bottom, is more. That's the 1.65. We have a relatively small number of duplexes and triplexes, which you can see the values of there. And then the condos, which is about a fifth of our homeowners, is lower. So it blends out on a weighted average, that 1.457 million. So that's what the first page of numbers are on, but then I also show it by single family or condo, just so people can see it. That's one important assumption, which is what are you modeling this on? Is it a single family house or is it the average home in town, the owned home? There's apartments that are outside of this as well. That's one. The second one is what is the pace at which we phase in the override? So this depends on the operating model. Capital, we just assume it all goes in at once. But from a operating perspective, looking at different versions of the model, we have it 70% of it going in year one, meaning whatever number there is, we don't pull the whole levy down, and then the balance of it is pulled fully in year two. So all of it is pulled over 2 years, but 70-30 on the operating side, and then 100 on capital. This is a technical assumption. It's fairly non-controversial, but what does Prop 2.5 compound on? It compounds on between 85 and 88% of the levy, based on the share that's exclusions versus the share that was done as the base levy and operating overrides, including the capital stabilization funds, because those actually grow at 2.5. When we excluded Lynch, that does not grow at 2.5. That just was a number we picked, and then it stays. So that's a technical assumption that's important. I set that at 87.5. And then the last piece is that people had asked for, let's look at the override, but let's also take a look at other things that are going to hit us. If there's anything left on Lynch, if there's anything left on South Reservoir Dam, if there's anything left on Morocco Culvert, and then taking a look at the Morocco School project that is obviously larger, and if it's voted on according to the note from EFPBC in sort of 2.5 years, we might start to see some of that hit in fiscal year 29 and 30. So what I did was I asked Stacy for the exact same project size as Lynch, and I appreciate school committee doesn't fully agree with the schedule. They also don't, I don't think the project is of the same scale. But just to be conservative, we used the same 71 million and the same phase-in schedule following, in that case, a January of 23 vote, and then stuff hit the FY24 bill. We're using the same thing, which is a Q4 28 vote, and then it would hit in July of 29. Okay. So what we have here is how all these things come together. So I just want to show this, and then we'll just show output from this point forward. So we have average home value of 1.465. This is the smallest override I've modeled. There's, the board hadn't really picked anything, so I showed a wide range. 8 million. Again, this is totals. This is operating plus capital. 70% hits in year one, 30% hits in year two. You see that here, the 690 and then the 296. Then we have the debt service from Lynch, the Morocco culvert, the South Reservoir Dam. Morocco School doesn't hit for a couple of years. So it's out into 29 and 30. And again, that's assuming the same schedule and the same size of project in terms of local share. And then CPA compounds 1.5% on everything. So if you have an override, obviously CPA goes up as well because it's 1.5% on a larger number. So in this case, when you get down to it, the question is, what is the share of the increase that comes from the override? That's the 700, 317. And then since the override is fully pulled, the override will increase only a little bit of the taxes in these out years. And that's because Prop 2.5 is compounding it at a slightly higher number than would have otherwise been the case. And then when you add in all of the exclusions that are, independently voters have approved already, or in the case of Morocco School, would have to, approve after that, you get the number in the row below. So we can debate what's the right number to look at. I think for the purposes of this conversation, it's probably what's in yellow. For the purposes of taking a holistic view of everything voters are being asked to, vote on, but of course they're voting on it, then it's the bottom row. So that then leads to this page. So just to orient you, because it's a wall of numbers, we have down the left side 6 different override sizes. Again, this is total override. So 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. We can obviously pick numbers in the middle of those, but just to give people a directional sense of where we are. The impact of the override is what you see highlighted in yellow. So the 700, 317, 25, 26 is the same as what you see right here. Similarly, the total impact is what you see in the row below. And then the total tax bill is taking the 16,486 and adding the total impact to that as you go. And then at different override sizes, you can see what the impact is. So for a 10 million, it's 875 plus 397 plus 32. There's obviously also the other exclusions in there, and then you can see what happens to the total bill. And then you can see that for each of the scenarios below. Okay. The next page is the same page as the one before. This is just run on the average single family home, which is about 75.5% of our housing stock. So these are more valuable homes. The average price is that 1.65 million. So the numbers are, higher. They're linearly higher. And then this is running the numbers on condos, which are, lower valued from an average valuation perspective. So the average bill is 8,827 today. And so obviously then the impact of the override is proportionally lower. Again, it's linear. I didn't show triplexes and duplexes because it was 4% of our housing stock. Okay. Question I got from one of you, which is how do we compare to peers? So this is the set of peers we looked at the beginning of State of the Town across a wide range of things. So taking a look at them from a school's perspective, a fiscal policies perspective that we just thought were sort of most like us. That is our mill rate relative to everyone else. So we're at 11.07, as I said earlier. You can see where other towns are. At various override sizes, it adds 0.084 to the mill rate for every million that we override. So you can see where we end up for different override sizes compared to peers. Now, if these other towns have high schools or elementary schools that they're building, or they're doing their own operating overrides, that obviously is, I didn't go do that research, but from where they are today to where we would be on the other side of an override, you can get a sense of where they are. Okay. So happy to take any questions there. But I think the last part Michelle mentioned is really to frame out, where we are today. So, there's a big question that we have been attacking from different pieces for the last 7 months. And so over the next several weeks, we have a half a dozen or so chances to hear from the community and town meeting. And I think we need to give the community a clear view on, where are we? It could be a initial number that's a single number. It could be a range, but it should be things that we're realistically considering. In either scenario, I think we should have an operating and capital split. And we've, had a lot of conversations about level services, strategic additions, reserves, capital, and now tax impact. So the main question is sort of where are all of us? And some specific questions that might help to address that big question are, how long do we want the override to last? What level of additional revenue or cost savings, about 1.2 or 1.7 or another number, are we willing to commit to finding as a select board? What share of the strategic additions, both on the municipal and school side, are we looking to fund? Is it all of them or some other number? And then what's our view on capital, which is a little bit easier to wrap your mind around because it's just packages of projects. And then, as Michelle said, I think from here we would try to agree on a 1 or 2 page memo outlining our thinking, which we would then be able to start sharing with the community and the public. There's a draft deck that I've sent around that Michelle and I worked on, which we have a team MA briefing tomorrow, so we would hopefully want to start agreeing on that. There's a lot of pages that have to be updated pending our discussion tonight. But I think the main thing is to try to address the questions. That is sort of the big question, and then the questions underneath it.
Yep. So we'll pause on the materials, but let's, if you could, actually, why don't we start with the big question slide, Paris, and then
I'll put it back up. Okay.
Yeah, if you could. And so, or maybe you can scroll down one, which starts with the duration, I think, the specific questions. So let's start with how long do you want the override to last? And then, because you have a model with that table showing debt service. We have impact on reserves and we have impact on taxpayers in 2029 and 2030. We'll start with that one question, start with Bill, go to Mike. If folks have if it's 2029 or 2030, if it's 3 years or 4 years, but I'll start with Bill, go to Mike, go to Paris, Anthea, and myself.
Sure. I think we discussed this back in our first meeting in January or last meeting in December. I still would like to see a 4-year override, or plan. 4-year plan is what I should say, and an override that covers our goals for that 4 years. I think that is a period of time that actually allows us to get enough work done and doesn't force us to go back out to the electorate with another override vote sooner than they might want to have to deal with it. I think we can all appreciate how much work went into the state of the town model that we're working with today. And to do that as quickly as another 2 or 3 years from now seems unnecessary and unproductive. So in order to really fund some programs and make sure that they have a chance to succeed and get established and move on, and to avoid burning out our electorate with override after override, because another one is definitely going to be inevitable. And given that, I think it's also important to get off the contract, the contract schedule with our various union negotiations, and to space it out from any potential vote in Morocco. I want to see this go 4 years.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I mean, I think longer is always better. I think we've found that it's a little bit difficult for us to project. And I think that some of the good work that's come out of the town committee has, given us a good pathway here. So we have some direction around planning. Certainly, we have a lot of contractual obligations. We have capital needs. We have necessary needs at the schools around literacy and around math specialists. So um, it's we see enrollment trending down a bit in the schools, and so I think we can be strategic there with making some of those ads and still meet our policy objectives as defined by the schools. So um, I think choosing uh, a time frame I think is going to be difficult. We never even know when we're negotiating contracts. We don't have control over that really. I mean, it could be that the contract expires and then we are out of contract and then we're approving something retroactively. Health insurance costs have been really the game changer. I mean, when I first came on the board, we were seeing 1% and 2% year over year increases. Now we're averaging north of 10%. That's a big number, especially as we continue to add employees. So, I think finding the right size for the community as we're coming off of the CPA surcharge, the Lynch override, the general override that we're proposing now, an override for Morocco, which I hope the community supports, and then finishing out the decade and run through the tape hard that way. So I think with a right size override, it wouldn't be difficult for us to get to 4 years. Whether or not we're completely targeting a 4 year number that's higher. So that's my sense. I think finding the right number is more important than the length of time because I do think what we've seen is it's a little bit out of our control. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthea?
Yeah, so it is certainly out of our control in terms of how things go down the road, and it makes a lot of sense, as Mike said, for the longer the better. I think in terms of our approach and planning as we look at things, discussing with the 4 year number and targeting that for the management of the operating and capital overrides is where I would land. And I don't need to repeat a lot of other things. I think Bill and Mike had some pretty good points.
Okay.
So you want me to go next?
Yep.
Great. So just saying in statistics, which has been co-opted by people in finance, which is that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And there's no question that it is impossible to forecast exactly where we're going to be. So I take the questions that we're trying to answer here, the duration, the amount of cost savings and revenue enhancements we want to consider and bake in, and then the amount of strategic additions as helping us arrive at the number. There's no question there's a error rate in any of them, and our ability to forecast is going to be far from perfect. But in the absence of it, we're just sort of picking a number out of the air. And so when I think of this, I'm at 3 to 4 years. And I say that because I think it's just going to be really hard for us to guarantee 4 years. So what I would like to see the select board do is to pick a number that is, when we start to put the capital piece to it, and then we try to triangulate around a number, I think we're going to end up with a number that's in the middle. And then we really do have to commit ourselves to finding that last 6 months, 9 months, maybe it's 3 months, but it's something in that range to get us from 3 and change to 4 years. Because I don't think it's sort of just going to happen. The schools have brought their level of level services down over a percentage point, and the enrollment decline that they have started to see, or decline might be an overstatement, but leveling off. They were projected to come in this year north of 7%, and they brought it in at 5, and then are forecasting 4.44 because they're actually doing the cuts as it relates to section sizes and some of the other efficiencies that they're looking to find. So I don't think we could sort of double count those. And on the municipal side, on level services, we're at 3. It's hard to imagine us going below 3. I would love to have health insurance come in at 12 or 10, but it's been recommended we use the number 15. So and pray that we get it. So when I look at all of that, I think that we're going to need to do something very meaningful on the revenue side from the override perspective to get even to 3 and a little bit beyond 3. And then for me, it's a both and. We're going to have to commit ourselves to a lot of initiatives around revenue and cost savings to get us to that 4th year.
Okay. So I think I'll land on 3. But I think Paris is right. I think Paris, Mike, everybody's right that it's hard to predict. But 3 years, FY29 gets us beyond a contract cycle. The current cycle that we're in, contracts started in FY26, FY27, FY28. We'll be beyond the 3-year cycle in FY29. And in theory, this should get us entirely through FY29. So that's the horizon I'd like to see, but it will be important if we go down to, the additional revenue and the timing and spacing of additions. I think the next 2 questions will very much indicate how long it will go. If we use 70% of the override in year 1, we're certainly potentially shortening the horizon. If we use less of that override in year 1 and spread it out, maybe smooth it out over years 1 to years 2, year 3, a 4th year is probably more likely. And select board has some control on that on the municipal side. We can make some asks, I think, on the school side, or make some pleas, perhaps, to spread those, but we don't have the same control as to how they invest those resources. But that's my sense on the time horizon. If we want to go back, Paris, to additional revenue and cost savings, if folks have ideas, I do want to stay here before we move into the capital question.
So why don't we just look at this page, because you can see all of it on here, right? 1.7 is all sort of shown here. So
okay. So commitments, I think, on revenue, sort of ideas and opportunities is, I think, asking the town manager to implement some of the suggestions that we had from State of the Town, pursue some of the suggestions on potentially regionalization, some operational efficiencies, as well as fees and fines. I think it's to be aggressive on some new solar arrays in some spaces that make sense around town. I don't know if other folks, that's up for us to work with the town manager and other boards and committees to see some of those things come to fruition. Potentially there's some different ways to invest and look at interest income, but as a board, are we committed to pushing on that and doing what we can to grease the skids with our fellow board members, to work with the town manager, to potentially, do some of our own homework? I think that's what's being asked of us. If we say we're going to deliver revenue, do we commit to that as a board? And maybe we should hear that affirmatively, I suppose, from all of us.
So to me, I would commit to factoring in a number like 1 point. The way I see it, and spending a lot of time with this, 1.2 into our model, into our base model, and I'm going to give you a couple examples on why. So we had a conversation last week. Solar power, let's just take them out of order. We're at 55,000 a day. We do a bunch of arrays. Now they're not going to be out there on July 1st, which is what our model currently assumes. But hopefully we can get those built out and we can get that number, more than doubled. Fines and fees. I think that there's a lot of fines and fees. The first and largest sort of dozen of them, I think, can bring in a number that's at least in the six figures. What gives me some confidence on that number is that it's actually something Chris said in his interview with us, I think, which is the affidavit after you deliver your project about how much you spent on your building renovation, your home renovation, because I think the biggest category in that one is building permits, right? And Michelle, this is your work stream, but I believe that to be true. Yeah.
True.
So if for example, people say I'm going to spend X and then they spend 1.5X, and then I know, Chris, if you want to explain, I think you did this in Cohasset, people actually have to then say what they spent. You can collect more revenue as well as just the fee potentially going up. So that to me was the big one there. Interest income is going to be a little harder. We have brought the level of cash down because Lynch is done, right? We spent the money on the contract on building it. So I think Stacy's number, there's 500 in the model, so this is the other 500 is a million. I think she was comfortable with like half of this number. But I think there may be some other things we could do. And Michelle forwarded her an email today about an exchange I've had with the commissioners of the trust funds who could potentially invest our general stabilization, eke out another 75,000 there. We have to amend our investment policy statement. So you have to grind these out. But I would feel comfortable baking 1.2 in. To me, the heart, and this is where I say, like, I think we can bake a number in, and then the rest of it, the select board has to commit to get us that additional, 6 months or whatever. I think the other ones are harder, and they take more, political will to look at things like OPEB or look at things like transfer station, commercial rates or commercial volumes. So I'm willing to push those initiatives with the board with proper research. I just wouldn't be willing to bank on them because my fear would be those are things we're obviously going to get sort of more pushback on, and they're harder to bank on.
Yeah, and I'm hearing two questions here. I think the answer to yours, Michelle, is really easy. Are we committed to growing revenues in town? I think that's a flat out yes. I think everybody should say that as a no-brainer. That's how we succeed and grow. But what we're trying to do here, and now Paris, correct me if I'm wrong, is figure out what we want to put into our model to guide our numbers. And this is where I'm much more in the Stacey Ward camp that 1.7 I think is unrealistic for our modeling, and I think 1.2 is even a little high. I don't think revenues are so reliable that we want to put the financial health of the town dependent on the hope that we're going to grow them, because I am unaware of any time they've been as high as 1.7 and even 1.2 is a reach. And I'd rather model and develop our number from a conservative point where if we have undershot ourselves on revenue and we exceed what we've modeled, well, that just means that we can stretch the override all the longer. I want to prepare for the worst and hope for the best here. And I think that's the answer to what Paris is asking, prepare for the worst. But what Michelle's asking is hope for the best. How much that ends up changing the model, I'm not sure, but I think we have to be, a little conservative with modeling our hopeful revenues. And then I want to make sure that we are all working to prove ourselves wrong with that modeling.
Mike, then Anthea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough question, right? I mean, I think we have to make some policy decisions and have some discipline in the context of the overall tax burden on residents. And so I'd like to see things more incremental. I think it's good to be conservative. What that has ended up looking like over the years is we do have large reversions in departmental budgets, and then we tend to feel pretty good about that, and then go out to town meeting and spend that money out of free cash, right? And so it's whether or not we're going to consider some of those reversions to be something we cycle back into the operating side, or we're going to spend it more freely as discretionary funds, right? So there's some things that I think that we need to do. Certainly, increasing revenue is something that we need to be a lot better at, but also I think having the discipline to commit to what this money is for. It's for contracts, it's for schools, it's for health insurance, and I think over a 3 or 4 year period of time, I don't think it's too much to ask us to make those recommendations to the town. And the capital impact on some of this as well. I think we will discuss, but it's fair for us to explore some debt exclusion override for some of that stuff, or even a special purpose override. So I don't know that I have a direct answer there, but I think that by being more disciplined, there's room for us to get to 4 years relying on some not the most conservative of revenue numbers, numbers that stick to what the actuals have been. So
I have one factual clarification. So
Yeah.
the fourth bullet, important to note, the model does have 1.7 to in the first year, and the fourth year it's sort of 2 million of reversions that all drop to the bottom line. So none of that is spent on other stuff. And in the 1.7 or the $1.2 million case, that reversion number of 1% is taken to 1.25. So that's an additional 400,000 of reversions, all of which drops to the bottom line, none of which is spent on new initiatives. So that's just a factual point that is already accounted for in these numbers.
Okay. Anthea, any thought on that before we then move on to? I'll weigh in, but go ahead, Anthea.
Yeah. I think starting off the bat with this additional 500 is, I don't think we're ready for that. Yeah, I just don't think with time and planning that we can make that assumption in year one that we'll get to that. I think it could be a good target for maybe looking at in year 3, what does our revenue look like from these other sources? And ultimately, revenue hopefully sort of meets our model, but when we do have additional revenue, that also helps us stretch out our overrides that we plan for. Paris was saying, we get 3 years and 3 to 6 months, and we've been able to strategically work on the revenue side of things over the next few years, and that brings our 3 to 6 months to 9 months to 12 months. And I think that's really how we should approach revenue, not necessarily as trying to squeeze every last drop out today for the model, but being able to plan ahead and think of how we're increasing revenue over time. And then ultimately, as we do that, it's going to help us with extending our override, sort of the it's kind of the other piece of that. We're planning for an override for X amount of years with X amount of dollars, and as our revenue increases, it allows us to continue on and not have to come back. When we planned, just like our 2019 override was, set to be 3 years, and we're now in 2026 talking about it. So it's brought us 7. And there's, a lot that went into that, but I think that's how we have to look at this larger incremental revenue.
Okay. So Paris, I I think I've already sort of opined a bit on this one. I think it's critical as a board, if we're going to ask homeowners to pay more in taxes, that we do everything we can on our side to find revenue, to pursue, where we haven't changed fees in 15 years or 20 years, to at least try to get to market rate based on some of our comparable communities. So I think it's a both and, and to put it all on the taxpayers, I think I'm not saying it's easy, right? I think it's perhaps a little lazy, and we should get to work, working with all of our departments and being creative. So maybe if you can scroll down, Paris, to is the next question, I think capital, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just sorry, like there's a few comments in there about what are we choosing between. To me, we're not choosing between 0 and 1.7. I think 1.2 is a fair figure when we have virtually none of it. I mean, we have a couple 100,000 of the interest income identified. I agree, fines and fees we can get a couple 100,000 out of. Getting that interest income, we're going to be grinding it out. The solar, we're going to be grinding it out. The turnbacks, we're going to be grinding it out. So I guess I would take issue with the idea that the 1.2 is going to be easy or represent the board just mailing it in. I think the 1.2 is a very material increase in our local receipts and our turnback number that we have not seen. But for the increase in the motor vehicles tax, that was just a Commonwealth-wide thing that we benefited from. So I mean, we can debate this longer if we want, but I very much commit to these numbers. I think I've worked on every row of them, maybe with the exception of fines and fees personally. And I think there was a view that we shouldn't spend turnbacks, but we're taking turnbacks north of 2 million in here and dropping them all to the bottom line. So I think we just need to be realistic about what 1.2 actually represents.
Yep. Okay. So then the next item on capital, I think, then it goes up to sort of size and impacts. But view on capital, is this, I wanted to understand the question. I mean, for me, I have a strong point of view on debt exclusion versus operating for capital. But I don't know if that's the question that this is trying to get at. So I will hold my comment for a minute, but what are we trying to get at with this particular
I think
question?
the question is, what do we want to do now on capital, right? So if we were to look at, this scope, right, and we can pull up the Workstream 2 deck if helpful, we could take a view of, we're going to have two questions. One is or someone could have this view. One is we do it all as one question, as was done in 2019, with operating override into the operating fund, general override into the operating fund, general override into the CSF and BSF. That's sort of one approach. Another approach is, to your point, we exclude out a subset of these projects now on the March 2021 ballot, March 2026 ballot, March 21st rather, 2026 ballot. And a third view, I guess, is we don't do a capital share of the override, or we do a small one and we leave a bunch for an exclusion, I guess. The issue with doing an exclusion in March is we would need 4 votes, but we would be doing the town meeting approval after the fact, as was done for Skilling's Field, but has generally, with that exception, not been our practice, because it's not on the February 9th warrant.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, what do we want to do on March 21st in terms of asking the voters to support capital?
Mike, do you want to start? And then I'll go to Bill Anthea. I'll go last again.
I'll circle back to me, Michelle, please.
Okay. Bill, go ahead.
Sure. Always happy to start the conversation. And this is one that we've had before as well. I think, my personal view, this is a chance for us to get things done around town. and we should take it. I would support the full capital ask. These are projects that have been sitting on our queue for far too long, and they're getting more and more expensive by the millions of dollars. If we wait, they're only going to get more expensive. I don't think the debt exclusion is any better of an approach. If anything, I worry that it causes more delay, and lets these things sit to the side when we could be getting them done. I know there was a hope to do debt exclusions in between the last override and now, and it just never came to fruition. So the way I see this is I'm trying to solve a problem. We are trying to solve a problem. We know that the problem exists, and we know that we can solve it right now. So I want to do that because I don't know what a future select board is going to do. I think that there are benefits that come with approaching this capital problem through the override that increases the levy instead of just making it narrowly tailored to specific projects over time. Where will people support this? I think they will. We've heard already people come to our table just tonight, Miss Mooney, for example, who says that we shouldn't be leaving anything on the table. We should be going big. We should be going for everything that our constituents want. And there's not a project on this list that I've heard anybody say they didn't want. In fact, it's person after person who comes up to me keeps telling me to try and find more and get it done. So, town hall is a historic resource. It needs to be fixed both for the historic preservation aspect and just because our town staff work there. The schools, leaky roofs are only going to lead to more costly repairs down the road. Public safety vehicles, the same thing. We need those so that we can have a community where kids can cross the street and our houses don't burn down. It's all necessary stuff to me. And the best way to get it done is to get it done. So because of that, I'm fully supportive of everything capital is asking for here. I wouldn't support an override that doesn't have a capital solution. Are there things that could be cut off here, maybe the parks in playgrounds and approach those through CPA, which I do think we should be trying to activate to get some more projects done on the town side. But that's about 500 of the 3.5 that we're looking at here. So yeah, my perspective is we do this, we do it now because it's the only way to guarantee it gets done, and that's going for everything capital's asking for.
Anthea, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much with Bill on that. I would, agree with capital that fee is the minimum, and I think looking at this, adding in as well the library and the public safety building to get to E is important. We do have CPA, which has shown that it can get us to the outdoor recreation parks, public spaces. So I would either be at D or at E here with capital.
Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I mean, I think I've been hearing from a lot of residents that they feel like we've been doing a lot, and we certainly have been over the last decade or so on the capital side. I think people don't realize that our water rates have been going up really exorbitantly, really difficult for us to control every year because of our capital investment. I think we are the last town in Massachusetts that still uses Chapter 110 to fund capital projects like South Reservoir Dam. So we've been doing debt exclusion overrides for culverts, for turf fields, for a lot of things that are a little bit bigger than the stabilization funds can handle. So I think these are all worthy projects, and there are some priorities. I mean, I would say the town hall, is something we've known has been there. We committed to making it an electrification project, which costs more. I don't know if there's an ability to phase that in. Doing that project as a priority is going to also cause a pretty large disruption to our staff. So, I think that there's ways for us to be strategic. I think if we go to any department or any fund and we say, tell us everything that you need, and then we say those are all worthy, let's fund them all. I think that if we keep doing that, I think it's really going to undermine what our role is, which is I think the community expects us to be making strategic decisions over a period of time. So, we've been fixing roofs at schools. We had question 2 on the Lynch override to take care of that and some traffic. And so we've been nibbling at some of the larger projects a little bit at a time. So, I understand that from the Capital Planning Committee's perspective, getting an amount of money that is, in excess of $50 million would be helpful. I don't know that we need to solve all of these problems immediately, while we certainly do need to resolve some of the more substantial ones. So, to increase the levy permanently with in excess of $3 million is quite a big ask. We've been doing a lot. We've been doing bridges, as I said, culverts. We've been building a lot of schools. So I think I just want to come up with a number that respects our town meeting's faith in what we've been doing and the residents' faith in what we've been doing. And I think looking at H there, it's a big ask. So thanks.
So, Paris, I'm going to actually screen share for a sec, but don't go far with this little topic. Patty, if I can screen share for a second.
Yeah,
I promise I will send it right back to what Paris has. Let's see here. So I keep talking about debt exclusions. This is the capital plan from January of 2025. And 3 guiding principles. Keep $100,000 in each fund. No fund should be bonded beyond 50% of its debt service. We learned that lesson with the first McCall edition. Our debt service year over year is diminishing in the Building Stabilization Fund. Projects with costs between 1/3 and 1/2 of the annual fund inflows. The annual fund inflows are about $3.5 million. Projects that cost less than, let's say, $3.5 million are eligible for bonding. Projects with costs are expected to exceed 1/2 of the annual fund. So projects in excess of $1.5 million or $2 million would be recommended for debt exclusion override. This is our capital improvement plan. These are the operating sort of principles that capital planning follows. I don't know why we aren't putting town hall on a debt exclusion. If we're to put capital into this, I understand Paris's point. We need 4 votes and a vote of town meeting, but a project that exceeds more than half the cost of the annual fund should be recommended for debt exclusion. We seem to have leapfrogged that and the town manager's capital plan to get us to where we are today. I think we should put a capital number on this override. I'd like it to be a debt exclusion for town hall, but at a minimum then, if we can't get there, then $1 million for the capital stabilization funds, and potentially there could be some borrowing, there could be some CPA, but to permanently increase the stabilization funds for what are one-time projects, we normally do debt exclusions for one-time projects. They have a beginning, they have an end. Residents know how long they're borrowing and how long they're paying, and when that debt is done, it comes off the levy. A permanent increase to execute on 3 to 5 years worth of backlog leaves a permanent increase. And we're going to next go to what is the impact on residents. But I just want to pull out that is our published plan that Beth wrote in January.
I have a question on that. Do you want me to ask it now, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm done sharing.
So if you actually could reshare it. So the language in that third bullet says says that if the amount, let's read the language actually. So projects that are expected to exceed 1/2 of annual fund inflows. So the annual inflow into the CSF today is 3.8.
Right.
So
Okay, so 1.7 would be 1/2, right?
It doesn't
but the service cost of town hall, even if you did a full restoration, is 1.3, which is less than half, right? And
Right.
we would be overriding into it for the purpose of it. So I guess the question is it the project value, or is it the amount of that service? Because I read it the second way, because otherwise you couldn't even do Lincoln Chiller out of the CSF. It's the way I read it is that the debt service for town hall, which for the scope B is 1.3 million, that 1.3 can't exceed the total amount of the fund, which is the 3.8 plus whatever we may add to it this year.
Well, clearly that one project would cloud out the entire fund. And I'm suggesting that, I mean, we can ask capital planning to weigh in and join us, but to the extent that normally projects of that size would be a debt exclusion, and town hall is a, you know, 8 to $14 million project, of which borrowing costs could come in just under 1.5 million, but that would put all of that on that one project. And a debt exclusion could potentially give us, well, if it's bonded, it's also time limited.
But we're talking about, yeah, the time limit for sure. What we're talking about doing is putting the money into the fund to cover it. But anyway, you should continue your comment, Michelle.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
So I don't want to go. Oh,
well,
go ahead.
I haven't
Sorry,
answered.
just a clarifying question. To your document, it said that there was the full recommendation was in Appendix C. Would you be able to show us what that says?
Let me go back. Full recommendation is in Appendix C.
For what it's worth, the way I read that is it's 3.8 today, so half of that's 1.9, and so you can't do a project that's more than 1.9. Let's just assume we were to increase the amount of the capital stabilization fund from 3.8 to 5, let's just say, to add 1.2 to it. Then any individual project can't consume more than 2.5, which that's how I read CPC's language.
This is Appendix C.
For what it's worth, Roger is, I believe, on if we want to ask him to join. He did not volunteer, but we're confused.
See if anything's more on the next page. Nope, that's it.
Thanks.
Yep. So, do I think we should not address capital in this override? I do not. I believe we should. I believe we should potentially do scope A, get updated costs for the rest of town hall, and put it on debt exclusion. And Mike, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think what everybody's kind of saying is true here. When we talked about this on capital a few years ago, when we were starting to get in some of these larger projects, and we knew that we would be looking at it operating override. We had Lynch coming on, and we had learned from the original mistake of the stabilization funds that if you leverage them all right away, then you're not going to have money down the road, right? We all understand that. So I think it's the capital planning's perspective, at least when I was on, to be very careful about handcuffing us in the future, right? So it really is. I think the strategy is not, when we have these bigger projects, to increase the the levy in order to increase the stabilization funds. It's to go out to the community for the larger projects for debt exclusions, right? So, and that had been our practice. I think that's what most communities in the Commonwealth do. They don't look at larger projects and then just say we need to permanently increase the stabilization funds, every several years, right? So, but I do, if I could just finish. So,
you're making a second comment, but go ahead.
Yep. So, I would say we certainly need to, I think as Roger indicated, we need to increase the stabilization funds in order to meet some of these needs. And one of the bigger issues is the increasing costs of projects, right? I think Roger made it pretty clear that whether any of us like it or not, it's the value of the funds is decreasing just by the nature of the market, right? Things are costing substantially more. We get a lot less the more we spend. So yeah, I certainly would, as with the general override, I think that we need one. But I think, I think we need to kind of sharpen our pencil on the strategy for the increases to the stabilization funds. But that's just my perspective, right? I mean, there certainly needs to be something in this override for capital. So I would agree with that.
Yeah, I want to let Pars speak, and then Roger McPeak has been elevated. So go ahead, Pars.
Yeah. So a few thoughts. We have rebuilt 6 of our 7 schools, right? And 2 of them, McCall and Ambrose, were done through leverage on the stabilization funds. And I agree, we've moved away from that strategy. But those were a substantial expansion and a de novo construction. The others, Lynch, VO, and
high school
and the high school, have been excluded, right? So for a de novo construction, you absolutely do a exclusion. But then that's our practice going forward. I've spent a lot of time, and I don't want to speak for Roger, with the capital planning committee, and probably most of its members, if not all. I've never heard the view that for maintenance and restoration, which is what scopes really all of them are, but certainly Town Hall, Ambrose, Lincoln, McCall, which are roof, HVAC, and critical systems projects. And there was not any money really spent on a roof as a result of the 2023 Lynch override. There was question 2 that went to traffic calming. None of it was marketed for or went to a roof project. I want to be clear, that was a comment that had been raised. I researched that with Roger and with Rich Mucci, and that didn't in fact happen. So this is all critical maintenance work. And so when I look at putting capital into our stabilization funds to do restoration work that's $7, $8, $9 million, Town Hall may be larger. If we do everything at once, right? The windows and the carpets and the ADA and the HVAC system. And then we're talking about multiple schools. We're talking about library windows. We're talking about the public safety building, a couple $1 million there. That to me is exactly what our stabilization funds are created for. This is critical maintenance and restoration. It's not de novo construction. Now, I appreciate our school building projects have been done via exclusion, as have been our
flood mitigation,
program. Those have been done via exclusion. But I don't think capital planning's ever taken the view that critical schools maintenance or town hall should be done via exclusion. It's certainly not a view I would take. And if you look at a lot of our peer communities, when they've tackled these big projects, they've pieced money together from their stabilization funds, from free cash sometimes, from CPA, from really any source possible to do these projects. I think it's not the case that it's always done via exclusion. That's just one point of how we finance it. The other point I'll make, though, is embedded in what these projects are. So we should be proud of ourselves for opening Lynch, and a few years before that, the high school, and a few years before that, VO. But if we aren't maintaining schools like Ambrose and Lincoln and McCall, and if we're not maintaining Town Hall, that's how we end up in the situation where we have assets that fail. And the old Lynch failed, and we had to tear it down. And we have the carriage house, which has failed. And I don't want to see these assets fail because I don't think that's good stewardship. And what I hear from residents all the time is not, I'm overwhelmed by, the amount that you're asking me to pay for maintaining our schools or maintaining our roads or maintaining our parks. What I hear is, I would like to see more responsible stewardship from the town of really taking care of the things that it is responsible for. Because if we don't do it now, we do it later with interest. And there was a whole discussion about doing these projects as an exclusion in the fall of 2023 that bled into 2024, and it didn't happen. So continuing to push these down the line, to me, just subjects us to that cost escalation.
Roger? Thanks, Paris. Roger, would you like to?
I just want to provide a little bit of context. Those guidelines were developed, and I was a part of writing those guidelines when the Building Stabilization Fund was spending over 70% of its incoming revenue on debt. And we were being encouraged at that point in order to be able to get things done to take on more debt, and we were fighting vigorously against it, as I'm sure Mike can recall. So we took on the important guideline of we're not going to take on more than 50% debt from the incoming funds into the stabilization funds. On top of that, we limited the size that we might take on as a debt funding. But most importantly, what we were really doing was putting out a cry for help and saying, if it's bigger than that, we're throwing up our hands and we're just going to say to the select board, you've got to find another way. Now, we said debt exclusion because that's obviously one mechanism of it. But I can say that capital has always sort of been largely agnostic regarding the mechanism, whether it is funds into the stabilization fund, which obviously benefits the longer term capital picture, or whether or not it's a debt exclusion for a specific set of projects. But really what that whole thing was about was us saying, we can't take these projects on. And we were seeing so many, at that point in time, $500 to $1 million project that we would have, again, bankrupted the fund, as happened at the beginning of the 2000s. So that's what those guidelines were really trying to do. I wouldn't read that it is specifically a call for debt exclusion as opposed to really a call for help. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Roger. That's helpful. Mike, did you have one more thing to say?
Yeah, just quickly. When strategically with the Lynch override, we added on the second question. It was because for some reason the select board wanted to take the traffic piece on our own, which was fine. And then we also wanted to add debt service money for debt service on one of the roofs. At that point, Pete had said that there were school roofs that needed to be replaced. So that project was for that reason. If management decided not to use those funds for that, then it's still there for that reason, or was appropriated somewhere else. But that was the strategy then, to add that revenue for debt service for at least one of the school roofs. So, we talk a lot about the large debt exclusion projects, but the stabilization funds have been maintaining all of our school assets substantially. That's where the money has been really going. So we didn't neglect Lynch. We were planning on replacing it. And so as with what we did with Morocco, with the life extension project, we can't replace every building every year, but we have been really committed to maintenance and of our facilities, so they are more than adequate. So and I'm sure Roger could explain how much of that the stabilization funds have been funding school projects. It's been quite a bit. So I would say that strategically, when we look towards the end of the decade here, and Morocco is going to be completed, and we will have rebuilt all of our schools, and we'll look to kind of start back at the beginning and on the maintenance side of some of that construction. We really are heading towards a rather than a construction strategy to a maintenance strategy. So that will be the boards in the future will have to be dealing with that. I know the town manager has had experience, with special purpose, maintenance funds in communities in the Commonwealth, and so it's not. I guess my point is, it's not just about constantly putting money in the stabilization funds. It's being strategic around these certain things. So that is my only point there. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay. So, Paris, and back to screen sharing for you. I think we may have got through the questions. I'm not sure we have consensus, but maybe want to go back to the.
Can I just
yes,
add an additional comment? I mean, I think I appreciate, thank you, Roger, for being on to provide context to that. I was able to dig up, it might not have been the same year's report, but report from Capital just to take a look at how they described sort of the eligibility for bonding and what the debt capacity was and things like that. It goes back to and emphasizes that there was not a debt exclusion for capital to address some of these projects in 2024. We're now 2 years later, and so I think the size of the capital backlog has only grown. The cost of when I first heard the town hall project, I think it was $3 million, then it was $7 million. So we're at like a critical juncture of, falling very, very far behind on repairing many things and rejuvenating the town hall and being able to bring these other the heat at Ambrose and sort of these other things in line. And I think there is more than just this recommendation said debt exclusion. There's a really strategic conversation that we have to think about of placing an override on the ballot is a big topic. We've been talking about it for months, and strategically, we have to think about the best way to package the override and to put things together and to put us in a position to be successful with it. And I worry that we're at risk if we're dividing things up and like slicing and dicing what we're asking, that we're gonna fall back into this pattern of capital where our needs grow from 2 or 3 years ago, it was $39 million to 50 some million dollars with this municipal cost index that Roger was talking about. I mean, it's just going to keep growing. And if we don't address capital now, if we, squeeze it, we're going to be at real risk for failure and things that we have to come back to with, limited options for how we address them, or that move other things off the list that, are at the point of becoming critical too.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's go. I think we went through this page. Maybe Paris, go up a page, because we still have to get through the town meeting topic as well, and a few other business items. So we noted that we have some public hearings, including one starting tomorrow. We have a town meeting on February 9th, another public hearing on the 10th, another select board meeting, probably to finalize a number. So if we, let's start with the second bullet. do we have consensus on a single number or a range of numbers? And I think there's certainly support for an operating and capital. I think I'm the only one who wants a debt exclusion, and I certainly think we should get some capital into this question. So maybe that we need to stick with bullet number 2. Is there a number we're considering? And I think before we get there, Paris had talked about the impact on taxes and on residents. And at $8 million, $10 million, $12 million, the impact of the median home and the single family home. If we go until 2030, so that because that's what the tables have, we're looking at increasing our neighbors' taxes from 20 to 25%. At $8 million, it's 20% over 4 years. At $14 million, it's 25% over 4 years. So I just want to put some context around that. And that does not include what everybody pays in water and sewer every year, what everyone pays in excise tax-ish for the most part, and just even holding the transfer station permit fee at $330 at its current level. You could overlay another $1,200 growing to $1,340 by the end of that 4-year horizon. Those rates go up by 3 to 4% every year. And then the last thing before we take some votes to raise our neighbors' taxes, I think we hear about maintaining schools, we hear about maintaining our buildings, we hear about maintaining our services. But one thing I think we also need to ground ourselves in is people's ability to pay. So I know we've seen government shutdown at the federal level impacted a lot of our neighbors last fiscal year, but I just did 2 points in time comparisons on food stamp caseloads in Winchester. In 2021, so the year after COVID, the end of calendar year 2021, Winchester had 105 active food stamp cases. I got this directly from DTA. In June of last year, in 2025, we had 400 cases. And in November, because December's report wasn't ready, we had 382 cases. So our cases have gone up. They've more than tripled, almost quadrupled in 4 years. So I don't take lightly a decision to place a ballot question to permanently raise my neighbor's taxes. And I don't think any of us should. And with that, and I think this is important, and I appreciate Dan and Paris and Mark and others helped us to get here. This also doesn't include probably 5.5% water and sewer rates going up every year. Everyone pays excise tax. Everyone has their trash handled in some way. So those are on top of. And we do have some neighbors that are struggling. If, 105 cases went to 380 cases, and it was in 2024 cases were up over 2021. So every year since 2021, our food stamp caseloads have been increasing. And it's not that our population has been increasing so dramatically. So let's start with maybe ranges of numbers or numbers, but I just wanted to put some additional facts out there.
Okay, I'll go first again.
Do one quick clarification. So I just want to be clear, these numbers in here, the total tax bill number, I think Michelle quoted the 8 million figure and the 14 million figure, which you're right, it's about a 5.5% CAGR, right? So the annual increase about 5.5%. I just want to be clear, that includes these exclusion numbers, right? So Lynch, Morocco, South Reservoir have already been voted on. And then Morocco in the latter 2 years would have to be voted on separately. So the sort of taxpayers, if they do vote for the override, they've already had 3 votes. They would get that 4th vote too. So it's sort of with and CPA as well, they've voted on. So just to be clear of what we're putting in front of them, and then, what they have also had a chance to weigh in on. But sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Sure. I certainly agree with Michelle that none of us should take this lightly. But inflation and costs are going up for everything and everyone across this country right now, and that's going to continue. And it's my belief that a government, a town, is supposed to provide services. It's supposed to provide education. It's supposed to provide safety. It's supposed to provide community, all these things. And those things are not getting cheaper, but they're still wanted. And I know we all go out and we talk to people and we get emails and everything else. And the feedback that I overwhelmingly get is this town needs to do more for its people. Part of that is, yes, respecting the cost of living here. And I understand, I hope this board is committed to a residential exemption that's going to help ease any burden of an override on the people who really are suffering from it. But, you can play with numbers in all sorts of ways. I think that when we look at this override, it's not looking at, a 10 million or 15 million or $20 million override. It is looking at the individual household in what it means to go from a 12 million to a $16 million override. And the numbers as we see them, it's about an extra $130 or so for every $1 million that we increase the levy. And for every $130, we're getting a town hall repair done. Another $130, we're getting literacy curriculum fixed. Another $130, we're expanding our services for seniors. And so, when we look at the override number, looking at 15 million isn't something that a lot of people can comprehend. But looking at, well, for $1,600 we get this, but for $1,800 we get so much more. And that's really the perspective I'm taking. So when I look at my range as to what we should be doing, I'm starting at what we need to fix the problems that we've identified, what we need to fund the additions that we want, that our residents want, that we've been told that they want, that we've discussed and voted on that we want. And breaking that down, if we do a full capital plan, that's approximately $3.5 million into the override. If we want to do the full request from the schools and also acknowledge that there are some fringe requirements in those costs, that's $4.75 million. If we're actually going to cover our full current operating deficit, that's 5.75. And that ignores the future deficit that will be continued to grow because of the difference between Prop 2.5 and inflation. And I think we've estimated that to be another 3.5 million if we want to tackle it. And if we want to hit our municipal ask, that's 1.5 million, which means if we want to actually solve all the problems that are in front of us right now with the best guarantee that we're not going to put our reserves at jeopardy of dropping below our 10% threshold that will then put our bond rating at risk, we need an override of about $19 million. That's a lot of money. I respect that, but that is where I'm starting. I would love to go higher. I don't think it's necessarily feasible, but that's where I'm starting. If I'm giving a range and I have to cut something from the $19 million number, as I said earlier, we could cut parks and playgrounds from the capital plan and have that more targeted through CPA. We could ignore the fact that some of the schools' request is going to have some fringe spending, and we could cut everything that we've added into our municipal additions. We could ignore the fact that that's going to continue to grow. So just to do the bare minimum to fix what we are dealing with right now, the number that I see there is 13 million. And this shouldn't be a surprise. It's not to me. One thing I looked at was comparing what the 2019 override would be today. And if you just plug that into the change in CPI or marketing, I don't know if Paris.
I'll throw it up on the screen, Bill. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please do. The last override, if we did it today, I think it would have been, there it is, 12 and a half or so, or 13. So that should be our bare minimum. So if it's 13 to do the bare minimum to fix some of our problems and 19 to fix all of our problems as we currently see them, that's my range.
Anthea, do you want to go next? Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I also acknowledge that I think this needs to be a big override because we've had 7 years since the last one. That wasn't expected. We're doing a lot of catch up. We've mentioned this debt exclusion plan that never came to pass with some of our capital problems that, again, I think need to be addressed right away. And I'll just go back to what Ms. Mooney said earlier and what I hear from other people. They just want an override that gets everything done. And we've talked about over and over again what it takes to get to done. This is the first step in getting to done. And I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think that there's support for it because people love this town.
Okay. Anthea?
Yeah, so I'm doing some back of the envelope quick calculations as we're discussing this as well. I think feel like this is often the case. I agree with Bill in a more tempered way. Yeah, I think $19 million is unrealistic, and I'm not going to start there. But looking at, I think we really need to meet the requests of the schools to commit to the literacy program to reach the similar objectives with the math program in the schools. I think what they provided was very clear about what the upcoming needs were, how to address those, and why those are upcoming needs based on historical information and historical trends in student progress and gaps in curriculum. So I think that's critical first. I said before on capital, I am at D to E on capital. The difference in that is $135,000. So I could split hairs on that, but I think if we go below the town hall and schools on capital, we're really at risk if there's any failures down the road. And we have, other critical things that are going to hit our capital queue at some point. We talk about the Sims Corner Rotary, and we're going to need to, and we're doing a $300,000 study for that. We're going to need to put more in that from the capital side so that we can benefit from what the state can commit to on the tip. But, if we have the heating system fully fail at Ambrose, what's going to be the thing that goes, and is that going to risk, what I think like hundreds of neighbors from the neighborhood signed on to and said this is, a critical safety problem. I think we probably have, if as we start to pull this together and massage it into a number, we probably have some room in looking at municipal to talk about, are there things that we could, I don't think it's a lot of room. I think it's small numbers, but we can look at the municipal and pare things down. So, I was doing some back of the envelope, but not critically this. I think it's probably targeting between what is like 12 and 15 or 16 million as my sort of starting point as a range. I also think if we look at taxes, Michelle, you said we're seeing like 20 to 25% growth, but we're going to see it's going to increase 10%. And, our taxes go up at minimum 2.5%. And so it's not like we're going to stay at zero from here through the next 4 years and that we're increasing taxes out of nowhere. Our taxes are going to increase incrementally at some level. So the actual sort of add on top of that is, I think, not quite as dramatic. And we can also look at, the impact of an override. Well, it is, increasing for at $14 million. The tax bill increases about, in the average home, just under $2,000 in the year, which is a lot. It's about $500 a quarter, but then it goes up less than that. To FY28, it's $250 a quarter. FY29, it increases $150 a quarter. FY30, it increases about $150 a quarter again. So
I think it's important to consider what the impacts are, what this looks like, what Bill talked about, which we haven't come back to in a while, but the residential exemption and how that can support our residents. But I do think we need to, look at also what does this look like incrementally? How are we getting through this? If $2,000 gives every kid access to a full literacy curriculum, if $2,000 next year gives every kid access to a full literacy curriculum that's science-based and it restores our historical town hall buildings so that we don't have mold in the basement and leaks in the offices, I think for an individual that is a very reasonable amount to keep operations at our schools, our buildings, and keep our staff employed in the town.
All right, so Mike, who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Mike, if you prefer. Sorry, was that Mike? Do you want to go ahead, or do you want me to?
Well, go ahead. Yeah, after you, please.
Yeah. So a few thoughts. So let's take them in order, I guess. Let's start with operating budget. So from an operating budget perspective, if you take 1.2 million of additional revenue and cost synergies, which again, I think takes a lot of work to get to the 1.2 million, right? So this is this. This doesn't exist yet, and it takes a lot of cost discipline to get to the 1.2. Let's take that as sort of a base case that we're going to commit to that, and that means we really have to commit to it, not just sort of wing it and hope it happens. On top, so that lands us here, right? So let's just take, for the sake of argument, the middle two rows, the 11 and 12 million. On 3 years, it gets you there. On 4 years, it doesn't. So you have to go find more. So the next thing you can look at is pulling back on some of the strategic additions. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, they're on the municipal side, but I suppose they could be on either side. So that's this. So for every sort of 140 to 220,000 you pull back, we add 0.5 to 0.8 to the level of reserves. So let's just say 0.8. So let's double that number. Let's cut 500,000 out of our asks. Okay. So which I think we can scrutinize them very carefully, and we don't have to do that tonight, but let's cut 500,000 out of our asks, plus the 1.2 million, which I think is harder than we think it is. So now we're at, on a 4-year basis, on an 11 or $12 million override, you're at 7.3 to 9%. And I think the way you get the rest of the way there, that additional 1 to 2.5%, is to find some of this $500,000 of revenue on the right side. And so it's the 1.2 plus cutting 500,000 of expansions from schools or municipal, plus an additional 500,000, and an 11 or $12 million override can get us to that 4 years. So we're sort of getting to 3 and change, as I sort of said at the beginning, with an 11 or 12, and then that committing to working really hard to find that something close to that 1.7 can get us the rest of the way there. And that is, I think, just what the math is to me on an operating basis. So I'm very, as a what I do for a living, allergic to sort of double counting and using projections and math that's already been counted. So I think that, to me, when I look at this objectively, I think that we want to be disciplined. We want to be aggressive on new revenue. We want to get to 3. We want to try to get it to 4, and we need to do all of the above to get there. So that's where I'm operating, sort of 11 to 12. So then let's switch to capital. So I'm more where Anthea is, which is, I think you said you're at D to E, so sort of 2.5. I do think I take seriously the point that we have to just stabilize our assets, right? We have to get town hall and the schools and our buildings into like solid shape. I do think, though, that having some additional flex for example, what's not in here, right? the DPW has said they need more money to maintain our roads and our sidewalks need a whole plan around them. Things that break, right? As Roger will always tell us. So I'm between sort of 2.5 and 3, right? I do think there's some things we can cut. There's some things we can defer from the full CIP, but that's the range I'm at from a capital perspective. So I guess if you add that up, I'm at 13.5 to 15 million. Okay. So then you look at the tax impact of that. And I agree with Michelle. If you were to just take a 4-year number, right? I was scratching numbers out along with Anthea. It sounds like on a 14 million, this is the single family. For the average homeowner, I got 24.7% increase, right? For an 8 million, it's 20%, by the way. So the difference between the two, when you do an annual growth rate, is 4.6% for the 8 million, the top row, and 5.7%. So it's an additional 1% roughly to go from 8 to 14. And that's to Bill's point of each additional $1 million costs about $10 a month, right, to a typical taxpayer. So it does, certainly add up, but 4.6 is sort of the base growth, and at 8, and it's 5.7 at 14. So I just want people to get the annual number as well. And I think the other thing that's really important to me when we talk about those numbers is that those numbers are not driven exclusively by the override, right? So there's Prop 2.5 that just increases 2.5% a year in the 4. So take the $5.7 million. Take the 5.7%, which is a $14 million override. It's this going from 18,321. It's actually going from 16,486 to 25,662, right, over a 4-year period of time. That's 5.7%. Prop 2.5 accounts for 2.5 of it. The override accounts for the second largest share of it. The Morocco reconstruction, which voters will vote on, which is here, accounts for another chunk of it. The Lynch School, which voters already voted on, and this is the residual of it that still needs to be put into the levy, is the next largest piece of it. After actually CPA is the next largest, then Lynch School, Morocco, South Reservoir Dam. So our voters have taken 5 other votes on Lynch, Morocco, Culvert, South Reservoir Dam, CPA, and then Morocco School, which they haven't even done. We don't have a project yet. So, when we say we should take stock of that fact that we're increasing our neighbors' taxes by a number, all these projects were approved, yes, by the select board, but also by town meeting, in all 5 of these cases, including CPA, and then ultimately by the voters. And so when I come back to it of, where I am from the numbers perspective, but also where I am from a values perspective, I absolutely have the focus on affordability. And I think when you look at these numbers, you have to take the affordability into account because that's what these numbers represent. The flip side, and Bill referenced this, is what do these dollars then do for us, right? What do they do for our residents, who are the people who have to approve everything we're talking about here? They've approved the exclusions, they'd have to approve Morocco, they'd have to approve the override. And the answer to me is those investments in our residents, right? In assets, for them on the capital side, in a new literacy curriculum, which, people are paying hundreds of dollars an hour for tutors, that can be, obviated. In a new math curriculum, people are paying thousands of dollars a year in math programs that can be obviated. On the Council on Aging, and adding programming there. From a WinRec perspective, we've added, 2 staff members to WinRec. Maybe we cut that to 1, but a community adult education director who can drive, a lot of programming through WinRec, which generally is much cheaper than private sector programming. So to me, these resources have a real, from a value standpoint, putting public services and financing them ultimately does save residents money. And food stamps itself, after all, that Michelle cited, SNAP is a public program people pay taxes for, and then that is provided to folks who need it. So, when I sort of sum values with the math of operating capital and the tax impact, the number I land at again is that sort of 13 and a half to 15. I'm happy to talk about it more tonight. I'm not saying we have to land there, but that's kind of where I am based on the analysis I did.
Okay. Mike? Or if you don't want to go, Mike, I will.
Oh, yeah, I'll just jump in quickly. Yeah, so I mean, I think that this is the right level of conversation, and I think that we're all pretty close on understanding the assignment here. I would like to see more incremental growth, and that's what I certainly hear from residents and um, uh, from seniors, but also from school age families as well. And we see, as I mentioned before, pressure on enrollment at the elementary level. And I understand that to be because it's cost prohibitive for young families to move here. So we need to certainly uh, continue our investment in the schools and fund their requests. Certainly literacy, math specialists, the things that are there. We've been incrementally investing at town meeting, and in addition to their yearly budget, we've been adding on to make sure that supports are there. So what I have seen from the different models and from the state of the town conversations is that I think that we can meet the needs of the community at a extremely high level. Under $10 million, whether that's however you want to break that up. I do think the capital side, the town hall is a priority, and I don't see another way of getting that funded without a debt exclusion or without adding to a stabilization fund. It's just not going to happen. So I would prefer a debt exclusion there. I agree with Michelle on that. I think that makes sense. And the community has responded to debt exclusions very well here. So I'm just worried that if we're looking at a 3 or 4 year horizon and we're looking at a 25% increase, then we're going to be coming right back, in just a few years, and saying we need another 10 to $15 million, right? And so it's that speed of growth. The exercise that we started with the state of the town back in 2018 was to have a conversation with residents about our structural deficit, that the 2.5% was never going to meet our needs. And so I think that the strategy there was to communicate smaller overrides over a period of time, and more frequent ones, right? So I think that's where we are. We're in that 3 to 4 year cycle of needing an extra $4 or $5 million on the operating side. So and where we've seen the drivers of that be enrollment increases, I think now we've seen that plateau decrease. Certainly, costs with contracts and healthcare haven't decreased. So we will need more money than we saw before. I don't think the assignment for us, as Bill mentioned it, is to solve all of our problems, because that is not how municipal government works, right? So statewide, everybody is looking at these costs, and they're looking at affordability, and they're trying to make it work for their communities. So they're not building the wall so high for people to get in and forcing people out. So I think that's where we are too. I think with an override under 10 as a substantial amount of money, I think we can get a lot done, and I think it'll respond to the priorities of residents. So thank you.
Okay. I think I'll be a little bit more specific than Mike, and I'll put my numbers at 8% for operating, 1 million for capital. That's where I was in the capital discussion 10 minutes ago. It's somewhere between A and B. That's where I'm at. So, Paris, I don't know if you want to describe that as a range.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just throw this up on the screen? Because I think it's kind of hard to follow everyone's math otherwise. So Well, I think we need to talk about where we are because I think this range is going to give the voters candidly very little information. And that's what I think we owe people now. So, Bill, you started off, let's say, operating capital total. So, Bill, you started off, did you give us a breakdown? I think you said 19 total.
Yeah, it was approximately 19 total.
Did you give us a breakdown?
Yeah, it was the full capital ask, and then the difference is the operating.
So like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Anthea, what was yours?
Around 2.5 capital.
Okay.
And I said total 13 to 16, I think.
Yeah, do you want my low again, Paris?
Sure. Okay, go ahead.
My low was 13. So if you ask for my range, Paris, my range is between 13 and 19 million.
Okay. So let's just say this is 13 to 19. I think most people gave more totals. All right. Anthea, what was your other piece? Sorry, you're on mute. Still on mute, Anthea. Oh, okay. All right. I'm
How
gonna go
about
ahead.
now? Sorry. Range, I said 13 to 16 or 12 to 16. So
Which one?
it doesn't, wherever.
Okay, all right.
But love Excel. Um,
All right. I'm just
but
gonna say
that was
12.5.
in considering, all of the pieces together. So yeah, sure.
Is that good?
Thank
All
you.
right.
Mhm.
So I was at 11 to 12. Yeah, it's gonna do the same thing to me, right? I was at 11 to 12, and I was at 3. So I think I was at 14 to 15. Okay. Michelle, I think you were at 8
and 1.
1, so you're at 9. And then Mike, do you want to give a breakdown, or you just sort of said less than 10?
Yeah, I would say 8 and 2 is fine for me.
8 and 2, so you're at 10. Okay, so that's actually the same as last time. All right. So that's a real spread, right? And so I think the question now for the board, because we start, to talk about what they showed last time, when they went to a special town meeting, they went out with a range that was 10 to 12. So it was a 20% differential, and they ultimately picked the lower number. So what they went out with, and talked about this with the chairs of the last effort, they went out with 10 plus 2 on the high end and 8 plus 2 on the low end, 2 of capital either way. And then they ended up at the 8 plus 2 following town meeting. So, put aside the numbers that to Bill's point, we have the inflation adjusted numbers in the deck. But the question I would have is, if you take the end of this, we're at 9 to 19, which is a more than 100% differential in where the figures are. So I don't think that is a range that is going to give the town much information on what is likely to be on the ballot. So, so my view would be we should narrow this, and it does not. I don't want to prejudge the situation, but it does not seem we're going to be unanimous. So I do think we owe the town, though, a view on what is a realistic bottom of the range and a realistic top of the range that can command, 3 votes at this board.
Well, it looks like that's between 13 and 15.
There's only 2 votes at 13 for the bottom, which are mine and yours. Anthea's at 12.5, so not far. It doesn't seem like there's 3 votes above 15. You're right on the upper end of the range either. Somebody want to? So if you take the So Anthea's at 12.5 on the bottom, Bill's at 13, and I'm at 14. Right. My range granted is the narrowest. Or narrower. Like Michelle gave a single number. So that would imply 12.5. And then there's nobody at 9. There's one person at 19. There's one person at 16. So then you're right. The next high number that has 3 votes is 15. I'm happy to keep talking about it. The question is, I mean, Michelle, and if you want to keep discussing this, it seems like our views are far apart. I'm happy to have more of a conversation. It just depends what we want to do with our time. It's 10.
No, I think we should, we've got some materials to decide on and some messaging for the special town meeting. So if what you're saying is the range of 3/5 of the board is 12 to 15, is that where you landed?
I think it's 12.5 to 15, unless Anthea is reducing her 12.5 to 12.
Okay.
No. And I think, so I think what might be helpful is also to revisit, like I'm looking at our at your table with the average single family, or even the average home. And so the net, if we say 10, I'm just trying to say, like, what's the net difference if we talk 10 as a bottom versus 12.5 or 13 as the bottom of the range. We're looking at
Here, 1 second. I think you want the actual tax impact calculator.
$165 a year. Is that right?
Okay. So you want to know, can you see this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're saying 10?
Mm-hmm.
So the override impact is 1,231, and then you want to see it at 12.5.
Mm-hmm. But that's total.
That's over the 2-year period. Over the 2-year period, it's a $300 differential. I think the easiest thing to do is what Bill said, which is it's about $130 per
Yeah.
month.
So I think that's one thing to look at as we narrow in on this conversation. I guess I think the other thing is, if we go back to, sorry, Paris, the numbers you just started to throw up there, right? So if we look at, I have 3 screens, so it's always helpful to have 3 screens. If we look at, capital, if we go down to 2 million, which is really below what capital says they need to be successful, 2.1 million is the base scope of town hall, not the restoration, and the schools. So is that cutting out, from capital, that we're not going to do the full restoration of town hall, and we're not going to do library and public safety buildings if we were to do 2 million in capital. So it's like 2.1 on that dollar. If we go to a lower operating number, one, do we start to say this is a like really by the skin of our teeth to 3 years override? And what are the I can assume that no one is going to raise their hand and be the one who says let's take literacy off the table, but what are we taking out of the school budget there on operating override if we're at 8, and what are we taking out of the municipal operating if we're at 8? Because I think if we can't go 4 years with 8, and Paris, I don't know if we go 3 years with 8, and this might be a question that we have to loop back to to schools as well, but
so Anthea,
how
is
does
the
that
point
impact?
if I don't I mean to Paris's point, certainly I could answer for what I think the 8 would do, but if the goal is to where we are tonight is somewhere in the 12 to 15 range, that seems like that's where we're at. So we can figure out what we want to say in public briefings and at town meeting. And I think we can show we have the table certainly for 8, 10, 12. I'm just curious if it sounds like that 3/5 have coalesced around a number that's higher than my 8, and that's fine. I just want to make sure that we can get into what materials should go in the packet. We do have a budget summit, another meeting on Wednesday. That's a posted meeting for us, which is more FY27 focused, but I think we could also revisit some of the materials that we might want to give to voters in that meeting. But I just want to be able to try to move on to some of our next business. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know,
Anthea, this is plugging 8 into the model. So, like, this is why, if people want to see any bespoke analysis between now and Wednesday, please email me and Michelle, like tonight or first thing tomorrow. So if you plug 8 into the model, right? So this is 8 million, and then it goes 8.2, 8.4 because Prop 2.5. The strategic additions are hard to do, right? Even on a 3-year basis, we've reached the 10%. Level services is fine, right? You can get, they're on level services. And so then you are leaving behind all the municipal ads and all the strategic ads for schools, which include, to your point, literacy, math, and tier 2 stuff. So, I guess the question you might ask is, can we add a little bit of the strategic to get this barely to 10 on a 3-year basis? I'm sure you could, but it would be, given that this would be at 7.8, it would be a relatively small number.
Yeah. And I know it's late, so if we have a plan to continue this conversation, we have a town meeting in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So, there's 5 of us on the board, and I'd hate to say 3 of us forged ahead at 13 to 15 and have an opportunity to have some conversation around what does it mean to say 8 and what does it mean to say 13, or I guess what the full number, 9 to 10 versus 13, what does that mean, and what do we and don't we have? And if that's, if Mike and Michelle, you've kind of decided on that, then we don't have to have that conversation. But I think, it is a discussion about what we prioritize from a budget and policy standpoint. And if we're losing all the strategic ads, we're saying we're
getting at
not
ideas, are we still
committing to.
deliberating, right? So I'll point out last time, the Mr. Irico actually came up with a different number and worked with the town manager and showed it to the select board, and that continued right up through that special town meeting, and then ultimately the board kept deliberating and got to a conclusion. Mike was on that board, but none of the rest of us were. I guess that is a valid question for the board, which is, are we still deliberating on this? I guess I'll editorialize, I hope we are. But
yeah, I think given that we think we'll take a final vote on February 13, right?
Exactly.
I think we are.
Yeah. Okay. Good point.
So, and I want to hear the budget summit. I want to hear what Chris has put together. Not right now, Chris. That's what Wednesday's for. But, we've invited superintendent. I think we understand capital, but FY27, it's very focused on the next year. I think that will inform us. So yeah, I think we're still deliberating, but I also want to see if there's any new information. So, that's where we're at. I don't think that's where we're going to land, I'm sure, but, and we will have a few more opportunities.
I think that's a good, very important clarification that this is our snap line in time point on January 26th. We're still talking actively with each other and with the community.
And there could be some new information, right? And the governor's budget will come out by the end of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And that could tell us something as well. So local aid may not go up by much, but it could go up by something. And if that's $300,000 that we don't have to find in new revenue, that's $300,000. Yeah. And that makes something a little bit better in my little $8 million scenario. maybe it's 8.3. But anyway, let's talk, Paris, let's go back to, we have informational session Tuesday. We have a special town meeting on the 9th. We had in the packet, we had the layout of the special town meeting from 2019 and the speakers. And then we have a public hearing the same evening. So if we want to do a quick sketch of some of the materials we would present, I don't know that we need to figure out every single slide tonight, but I think the agenda was select board, hear from the select board, which was the chair, hear from the superintendent, hear from capital, hear about tax impact. And in our meeting this morning, Anthony and I were on prepping with the moderator and town council and the town manager, where we have an hour window for our special town meeting. Maybe we'll go a little bit long, but we don't want to blow the moderator's timeline and our own timeline to call a public hearing. So presentations are probably going to run 5 to 7 minutes. We're going to try to keep the presentations to about 30 minutes, 35 minutes of the meeting and leave 35 minutes for town meeting questions. So we have a deck. I think Patty had the link to it. It was, 50 odd pages. We don't have 50 minutes. But we maybe have 35. And that deck was the school presentation, the capital presentation, the select board presentation, the tax impact. It was all the things. So we do need to skinny that up, but I think we can build off of that if that sequence sounds right. It's select board's calling the town meeting, select board's calling the public hearing. We should be the ones to start the meeting. We should be the ones to facilitate the public hearing. And there may be some questions that are better suited for the public hearing, maybe implementation type questions. I think Karis may have had some opinion on that, and I will defer to the moderator if he wants to give us some guidance on which kinds of questions will be in order for the town meeting, hearing of the reports and debating the reports, and what kinds of questions are best suited for the public hearing. And that I think can help us understand the deeper dive, where those deeper dives should go. But we do need, if we're going to have materials at the table to go out to a mailing to town meeting members, we need to have a packet finalized after the budget summit on Wednesday. Like it has to get in the hands kind of at close of business Wednesday. So Paris, I'll kick it to you, an executive summary type handout, maybe FAQs, the exemptions for various tax relief programs. Those seem like 3 pretty basic things. We don't need to have the entire slide deck done, but what's the background we want town meeting members to get?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think what we promised people, and just to point it out, in the State of the Town report, that is the packet. Sorry, where's the State of the Town report? There it is. So we promised people in the State of the Town report, if you look at the bottom of page 5, people can read this. We said we'll reflect on the key findings in the report. This is sort of tonight and continuing. And then we prepare a concise action plan. And I think, as we talked about, Michelle, you and I think this can double as the background section for the special town meeting. So to give people a view, maybe it's just 1 page even on, maybe it's 2, right? Where are we from a assumption standpoint, revenue, expenses, enhancements, capital? What does that leave from operating standpoint, capital? And then what's the tax fairness, the residential exemptions, some of the senior programs and the veteran relief programs that we want to talk about, right? So that to me is one clear deliverable we need from this. The other thing that all of you have in your box that I sent late this afternoon, early evening, is it's on my 6:39 p.m. email, is the draft deck for tomorrow. Now there's a bunch of pages that have to be updated in it based on where we landed, and those are flagged in sort of a yellow sticky note. But I think the idea that Michelle started on this based on the Lance deck from 2019, and we took that and we added a bunch of the new State of the Town stuff. So with this conversation, what I'll do is I'll update that, and I think with TMMA tomorrow we will give it a run, right? See if this answers everyone's questions, or if there's more content we need to add to it. And frankly, we can even talk about that on Wednesday if we want to, because we'll have just come from it tomorrow. And then I think that will get us over that conversation and next week's conversation close to a town meeting worthy deck. So there's basically the background section. I think I can take a first pass on tomorrow, and we could talk about that Wednesday. I'll update this deck based on our conversation this evening, which Michelle and I went back and forth on today. We'll try that tomorrow, and then we can talk about that on Wednesday as well. And then from there, to your point, Michelle, we can assign out speaking roles. I think last time they had Lance did the overview. They had the town manager, they had the superintendent, they had Roger,
Yes,
still with us, of course, and then they had Mariano did the tax impact.
Yep.
We have more or less the same sections, slightly different, and we can divide up between us and staff. Schools had their superintendent speak. I don't know if it's going to be a school committee member or superintendent, but probably somebody needs to speak on that side, somebody on capital, and then we're probably doing the rest, including the beginning and end. We
Yep.
meaning the select board, TBD exactly who.
Yep. And I will work with Chris to get updated exemption tables, which I think we have, but just formatted that, and then update the FAQs, run that by town council, and we can have that ready as well. Why are we having this town meeting? What is the vote we can take? I'll have a draft of that. Okay. I think Paris, I want to make sure I didn't skip a slide on the deck that you had. Did we get through? I know this is the next section of the report, but I think that's where we needed to get to tonight on override, I believe. But let's make sure we don't move on to
so this is
our
operating,
next.
capital, tax impact.
Yep.
Key questions we talked about. The only things in the appendices, Anthea had asked for this, municipal strategic additions. I sort of assume we'll pare those back. Frankly, I included that in my thinking. That will get another 1.5 from paring these back. We should discuss what goes into the we won't really want to do it list versus we'll do it if the money comes available, type thing. And maybe some of that comes from schools too. So that's one piece. I think this is probably an easy formatted version of it. You could just print out the 2 pages and cross out things. So I think that is an important conversation for this board to have, right? Because to guide town meeting on. And then this is Bill's question, I believe, forgot it was Andy or Bill, on last time's override versus where it would be with CPI. MCI is the thing Roger talked about. It's American County and Community, City and County, their municipal cost index. Looking at 10 to 12 they went out with last time, that would be the equivalent of roughly 13 to 15 and a half. And then last time, of course, they landed at 10, which would be roughly the equivalent of 13. This is one-time costs. Yeah, I think everything else should be self-explanatory.
Okay. All right. So I sent a note out so hopefully people can be there for the budget summit Wednesday afternoon before we move on to our next agenda item, which is number 5. 4:30 select board room. I sent out to superintendent, chair and vice chair of school committee, chair and vice chair of capital, town manager's office, and FinCom chair that we, kind of the high level agenda. It's an FY27 look. It's a look back. It's a look ahead. It's some of the assumptions. Hopefully it's a 90-minute meeting. It usually runs 75 to 90 minutes. Select boards probably stick around and just let's vote on some of those materials that are going to go in the packet. So there's a reminder for everybody. Okay. So next up, we have 3 agenda items before consent. We have Human Rights Commission Working Group. Anthea, that is you, if you'd like. We have a memo on parking, but I don't think we have a memo on this in the packet.
Yeah, we do not have a memo on this in the packet, and actually given the storm, I'm giving people a little extra time to get back to me because I know over here most of our day was taken up shoveling.
Okay.
So we discussed the Human Rights Commission ahead of the fall town meeting, presented it at fall town meeting as a coming up in the spring. And I've had, after the town meeting, had a handful of folks reach out to say they were interested in participating in a working group to flesh that out a little bit more in terms of what it would look like, what the critical points would be. A few of those folks have had other priorities come up in the meantime. And so the goal would be that we just once we have confirmation of who is currently of all of the members who are currently available, that we would vote that working group into life effectively, and the membership, and that would be just a short-term group that runs between sort of February and the Springtown meeting to flesh out the bylaw article, and be able to bring things back to this board and to others. It would also include a member of the school committee. So
Okay.
since we'll be meeting a lot, hopefully we can have just a vote once those members are confirmed.
Okay. So more to come. All right. The next up, I'm looking at my paper agenda here.
Parking next.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Do you want me to talk about parking next? That was the other.
I was gonna do Washington Swanton and then do parking just to follow. But you're right. I probably should put those two together, and I did not. So we'll turn over for a quick update to Washington and Swanton. And I know it's going through the ZBA. We've got some questions. I've received some questions from residents. Mike, I know you attended the ZBA hearing. Is there an update? One thing that had come up from the public was local preference and the intent to have, town employees, people who work in town, people who live in town, to give preference, at least in that initial lease period. So if you could maybe give an update, and if there's some select board support for either of those initiatives that we need, and then in the changes in design, any update for the board on how that's going, because there was a change in the number of units and affordable units. But I'll turn it over, Mike, if there's any highlights for us.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I'll start on the local preference piece that was raised at the most recent Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, and on Swanton and Washington in particular. And there was broad support for it, and the developer, an attorney for the developer, indicated that they would collaborate with us on that and stipulate to that. It's more handling on our end once we start doing the lottery process and all that. So, but I expect it to be a part of the decision and a condition on the project, even though it's not a condition necessarily on the developer. It seemed like there was a pretty broad understanding of the policy objective there, and it is certainly something that we told town meeting that we would do. So really on both projects, Waterfield as well. So it was discussed on multiple occasions at town meeting. So and has been successful for us on both the Cambridge and River Street projects. So the state actually defines the percentage of local preference for us, but we can kind of ask for a maximum, and then they can indicate what that percentage is. So the more to come on that, but it seems like that will be pretty smooth sailing for us. And did you want me to talk about the design changes?
Design, yes, please.
Yep.
And to the extent that impact is on what we thought that building would be. Yes.
Yeah. So there have been some changes related to cost increases on the building that we have stipulated to, and been working with the developer pretty closely over the last 6 months on those. There has been some aesthetic changes that have come from the requests of the zoning board members. I will say the hearing itself and the dialogue at the meeting was great. It was very much a partnership with the developer, and they were very responsive to the board members, and the board members were collaborating very well with each other. So it was a very nice process to be a fly on the wall for. So the piece I think that maybe that they want to hear from us on at this point is on the use of the ground level retail. We had sold to town meeting that we were going to restore at least a portion of the ground level retail that historically had been at that location. And that is part of the policy objective that came through the master plan, with that being an opportunity zone, and the neighborhood wanting to have a place to walk to for a cup of coffee, newspaper, muffin, those kinds of things, right? So I think that that is what we explained to town meeting. That is what town meeting thought that we were buying when we purchased the land for development. And so I think we need to make that a little bit more clear, because it's economically it benefits the developer to not have so much activity at that ground level retail location. And I think now it's ended up being 4,000 square feet of retail. So we're hoping it's something that is different from a nail salon or from a real estate office, but something that can really get some movement on the street, some activity to serve the building, but most importantly to serve the neighborhood and restore activity at that location. So where we don't typically weigh in on things, because we were so heavily involved in this project and had a very specific policy objective, I think if something came from the board, maybe the chair could work with management to put that together, starting with the local preference, which as I said, they've stipulated to, and then kind of leaning in a little bit more to what our expectations are around the commercial space there.
Okay. I think one thing that's different is we still own this property. We took this property. We signed the LDA. So I went to a planning board meeting about the Midas property on Main Street and kind of made a comment about, no offense to our realtor friends and neighbors, but that doesn't drive foot traffic, but for offers and closings. So it's consistent, I think, with at least my personal view at that one planning board meeting. But I think to the extent that that was a bank and a convenience store and a photo store, and people had the ability to maybe transact business and get something at the convenience store, that neighborhood lost that retail, and that is different from a real estate office, and it's different from a business. So, now how do the board feel about trying to give some guidance or preference or suggestion around, planning board would talk about activating the landscape, but how do we feel about trying to give some encouragement to have businesses that invite people in, perhaps stay, and that are, busy multiple days of the week, not in episodic, maybe hair salons a bit more busy, but how did the board feel about trying to give some guidance on maybe recreating what was there? The footprint of what was on Washington Street, facing Washington Street, has shrunk by almost half. What's left on Washington Street retail is much smaller than what was there. But how do people feel about working? We have an economic development study that Taylor worked on with a consultant. We could pull some of those suggested kind of business ideas, but I want to hear from the board if we want to wade in to that.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? What's the level of our authority? So we obviously own the building as the town, and we execute LDAs on behalf of the town. It's on a comp permit hearing with ZBA. So is this we can opine to the ZBA, or is this a condition we could actually impose?
I think it's opining to the ZBA. I think it's the ZBA needs to impose the condition.
Yeah, the ZBA can impose certain restrictions or conditions on issuing a permit.
Yeah.
Our power really was in the contracting stage, and that's passed. So, the ZBA can do what they want here, and we have to put our trust in them because we appointed them to do the right thing. If you're asking what we should do, personally, I would love to see a coffee shop or a small restaurant or something like that, but I'm very wary about putting restrictions on property where we have seen failures in the past. I think it's more important that the market is able to dictate what is going to succeed there. And I'd hate to see this thing go up and there are such heavy restrictions on it that nothing moves in and it just becomes vacant space. So I I'd really rather just let the market decide what fits there and trust our ZBA appointees.
Mike, did you have a recommendation? I agree with Bill as a generic concept. I'd be interested in Mike, having spoken to them, if you have a view on that. But I will say this one's a little different to me, given that we bought it. So we're allowed to sort of like make it more of a public benefit conceptually. But if it's a non-starter, then we shouldn't waste our breath.
Yeah, I think that we owe it to the neighborhood to deliver what we sold, and that was very much a policy objective of this idea of kind of eyes on the street and restoring some of the activity there. Obviously, there are market realities, and there's 4,000 square feet of commercial space there. We have made quite a few concessions to the developer already. So, to make it more financially feasible for them. So we've took out the mezzanine piece on the back. We've given them more market rate units. We've reduced the commercial space. I don't think that the restrictions can be too heavy. I don't think it would be helpful to say it must be a coffee shop. But I think that most people would agree that if it was something like a Mamadou's bakery there that people could go in and out of, that I think the neighborhood could sustain it. And I think it would be a lot better for the new building residents as well as the folks around it. So I don't think the size of the retail space is going to be determinative of whether or not the building and the site succeeds. I think indicating to the ZBA that some conditions around our expectations around activity and maybe limiting certain more like passive activities there would be helpful. And certainly
not to talk about sorry.
And our planning department and our town manager can help with that as well. Sorry.
That was my point. So not to talk about the most controversial thing in Winchester, which is 10 Converse, but Brian did write with presumably Taylor a list of criteria about like it's not like just a coffee shop, but it's like stuff that interacts with the deck or the vista, whatever you want to call it there. I thought that language, I remember seeing it a month or two ago, was pretty good because it was like, oh, these are things that interact with the community, but not a nail salon. So maybe we just, to your point, rely on the planning department. Help us.
I can certainly reach out to the ZBA chair and report back to the board on Wednesday in terms of Paris. I'm familiar with what you're talking about on the other property with planning board. Can certainly ask for if ZBA would appreciate the feedback. Sometimes we offer feedback that isn't necessarily appreciated, but we still offer it anyway. So I'm happy to do a little bit of
this one's a little different, background. Right? Like, I mean,
yeah, we own it.
Spearheaded a purchase.
Yeah,
and so I think there's.
Or we can dig up the conditions that planning board was suggesting on the other downtown building, and
I think they're just like it's a very similar situation. That's why I bring that up.
And I think even differently. They're used, I mean, it's been 13, 15 years. Someone's going to say, no, Michelle, it's been exactly 14. But there was retail. You could walk to a Cumberland Farms type convenience. Yeah. There was it is a commercial zoned area. Be nice to restore something. Yeah. Okay. Well, then how would you like me to proceed? Would you like me to pull together some of what planning board has, work with the manager's office and building? Would you like me to reach out to the chair and give the board an update, or have the manager give the board an update? What would be helpful?
The chair is watching right now, so
true. I will not put Miss Zamboli on the spot unless she wishes to be put on the spot. She could just be watching for the sake of watching.
I think some combination of that works, Michelle. It makes sense to reach out to the chair on both those issues and maybe putting together. With management, include the planning department, just a small memo. And as Paris said, we're dealing with this same issue with Converse Place, and it was actually a big issue for us on Waterfield as well. So it's, this isn't going away. We realize that, you know, uh, ideologically, where we were 50 years ago of mixed use, now with expensive housing costs and development costs, it's different. It's not, it's a little bit more risky, but I think with some of these projects, it's an important policy objective, and I think the ZBA would benefit from hearing from us.
Anthea, we don't hear from you. I want to make sure if you want to be heard.
I think the only additional thing to say is that, we may want to emphasize the distinction between retail and commercial from the point of residents of the area who considered that there previously had been what was retail space there, and that the expectation is that retail space would be sort of the shopping type retail and not commercial business offices. And I think that may be some sort of framing that could be helpful, but that's all I have to add.
Good distinction. Thank you. Okay. So I think Chris, you and I can connect tomorrow, make sure we know who's following up with who. Maybe you take planning and I'll take the chair, but let's you and I talk in the morning. Okay. So then, Anthea, we now are back to parking, and then we have consent agenda. But you do have a memo for us, and then the
Yeah,
state
I
and
do have a memo for you. And how timely is that? Chris and I spoke last week, and in maybe his fourth or fifth day as an employee of the town. So he's going to take some of the items in the memo, specifically map and space, and work with DPW and police just on really formalizing what that could look like. The idea too, as in the memo sort of articulates being a pilot, and taking sort of the latter half of the winter to test it out, was maybe actually we take that pilot and we narrow that pilot even so that we're able to create something more measurable to sort of from town hall going north, bounded by kind of Mount Vernon Street and Main Street, to be able to have sort of a narrower window of the pilot, area of the pilot, and that way provides a more opportunity to say, what was the necessity for enforcement, and were there tickets or tows that needed to take place? Did it change what, we saw in behavior, which can be harder to do if you're looking at a much broader area of the whole town. So maybe our next meeting, we'll have that sort of clarification on what parking specific sort of restrictions and opportunities, for lack of a better word, would look like, so that we can say, do we want to run with this pilot for the remainder of the season? I heard maybe there's another storm next weekend, so we'll see.
It'll never happen.
Maybe this is just what we needed to kick winter into gear, is putting to park on the street.
One question I had, and thank you for the memo, and thanks, Chris, for meeting as well. I got a preview on this when we met for agenda planning. The only question I have, Anthea, and maybe it's between now and the next time we meet, do we need to have a meeting do a couple of us, or do we want the manager to talk with schools around if we wanted to use some spaces at Morocco or the student parking lot? What conversations need to happen in parallel?
Already been discussed when Chris and I talked.
Okay.
He was going to add that to his items to discuss with the school superintendent about access to Morocco parking lot, specifically because it's in that zone. and that's also, in parallel to how DPW clears
Okay, great.
clears that lot as well.
Okay. That was my question, just reading the memo. Any other questions? I mean, if it keeps snowing, it might be slightly moot, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's still good to do the research. Any other questions or comments? Bill or Paris or Mike?
To be clear, you definitely should not be parking on the street right
Right
now
now?
to allow our plows.
I don't think you can.
Yeah,
Physically.
that's true. To allow our plows to come back around, and I know on the main sort of school thoroughfares, our sidewalk plows to clear everything out.
Yeah, I think my question would be this. Given that I got somewhere along the lines of 36 notices from the town about overnight parking over the weekend via text message, phone call, emails, and carrier pigeons, I'd really like to know how effective those were in getting cars off our street, if people actually listen to them, because that's such a crucial point of the policy that you're putting forward. So we have like an excellent little study off of this weekend to see if we can rely on people to pay attention to notices like that. And if we can't, I mean, that's why we have strict liability, because you got to play to the lowest common denominator sometimes.
Yeah, so maybe I don't know, Chris, is that something that you could take back to UPW to see did they need to tow anyone who was impeding any of the plowing? And I guess what's that like? No, the snow really started coming down pretty early yesterday, and I think we had said 3 o'clock, but what was that like? At 4 o'clock, there were cars on the road, or at midnight, they had to move people out of the way.
Again, I'll find out. I'll find out.
Okay.
I've never felt more popular than this weekend when my phone kept ringing.
I saw one comment that says, well, they can't say they didn't tell us. I must have received 7 notices. So to your point, Bill, I saw something like that too. Okay. So thank you, Anthea. More to come on that. I don't think we can take on anything new, other than consent agenda and adjourn. It's rather late.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as posted for Monday, January 26, 2026.
Second.
Roll call vote. Anthea?
Yes.
Paris?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And I'll just note we just approved the PMC Kids Ride, so good for that. That's a great event. Okay, motion to adjourn then.
Do we need to sign those Wednesday, or do we need to come by, or
which one?
Is there a consent agenda we need to sign? Is what I'm asking.
If
So everything that you guys approved tonight, you'll be signing on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
Right.
Yes, just some liquor licenses and some
Motion to
licenses.
adjourn.
Yes.
Yes.
Patty, get us ready. That's for sure.
In
Thank
my
you.
little blue folder.
Thanks for the question, Paris. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Or motion to adjourn.
Excellent. All right, all those in
Yeah,
favor of that.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging in. See you on Wednesday. Good night.